Just gives me a thumbs up. Got it. Ready, Phil? Okay. All right, let's begin. Good morning. Today's Wednesday, November 2nd. This is the time and place for the regularly scheduled Nevada Gaming Control Board meeting for the month of November. Madam Secretary, has our agenda been posted in accordance with the open meeting law?
Yes, it has.
Okay. Today, we'll be covering all the items noted on our November agenda. And Madam Secretary, let's proceed with public comment, please.
This item is placed on the agenda to give the public an opportunity to comment on gaming-related matters. Please note, if you have any handouts or copies, please do not approach the dais with them. An enforcement agent will come grab them from you.
Okay. Is there any comments in the South? Please step forward and state your name for the record. We're going to hold you to 3 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Good morning to you, sir, ma'am. My name is Cassiano Corpus, and I have worked at Palace Station as a casino porter for 31 years. Still got nothing to show. I'm here to speak to you again. I am a union committee leader inside Palace Station. I talk to my coworkers and organize them to fight for a union contract. I am doing this for the good of my family, for my wife and 2 boys. I want to have a better pay, pension, and a better health insurance. I want a union contract that guarantees those things. We want station casinos to respect us and sign a union contract. We are not going to stop fighting until we win. Please help us. Thank you very much for listening, and God bless.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other public comment? Please step forward, state your name for the record.
Good morning, Ken Liu with the Colony Union. First of all, it's election season. Please make sure you vote. Every vote counts. And today I want to bring your attention to some potential violations of federal election law by Frank Fertitta III and Lorenzo Fertitta, who are controlling owners of station casinos and holders of suitability findings in the state. The Fertittas made $756,300 in political contributions at the federal level between 2019 and 2021. The Federal Election Commission reports by the recipients of these donations contain false, outdated information. For example, in December 2019, Lorenzo Fertitta made a contribution of $140,000 to the McConnell Victory Committee. The receipt lists his employer as UFC and occupation as CEO. The Fertittas sold the UFC in 2016 and sold their remaining minority stake in 2017. So the information on Mr. Fertitta's donation receipt is years out of date and as a result false. There are 24 other similar reports of false, outdated information about employer occupation on the receipts of Fertitta's donations between 2019 and 2021. The Colony Union submitted a letter to the FCC in April to ask for a determination as to whether this inaccurate information was knowingly submitted in violation of Title 52 of the U.S. Code of Voting and Elections. We provided a letter to you last time at the Gaming Commission meeting. The FEC has numbered this as a matter under review. As of today, we have not been notified of any final action. While federal regulator review this matter, we urge you to directly ask station casinos about such false, outdated information related to political contributions by its controlling owners. We think it's important to find out whether Frank Fertitta and Lorenzo Fertitta might have been responsible for inaccurate information being reported to the FEC. Specifically, we ask you to consider whether Frank and Lorenzo Fertitta might have failed to, quote, comply with or make provisions for compliance with all federal, state, or local laws and regulations, unquote, under Nevada Gaming Regulation 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments in Southern Nevada? If so, please step forward. Seeing none, let's go to Carson City. Is there anyone in Carson City? I see no one, absolutely no one in the audience either. So none. Madam Secretary, look, that concludes our public comment section then. I'm sorry, was there? Yeah. So this is a new practice as an aside, just to increase our security. Thank you. All right, Madam Secretary, the next item on our agenda is the approval of the prior month's dispositions.
Pursuant to NRS 241.035, this item is the consideration of the approval of the Nevada Gaming Control Board disposition for October 2022.
Okay. We've all had an opportunity to review these. Would either of you like to make a motion?
I'll make that motion, Chair Gibson. I move for approval of the control board meeting disposition from October 2022.
Here, Madam Secretary.
Member Katsaros?
Aye.
Member Watkins?
Aye.
Chair Gibson?
Thank you. All right, Madam Secretary, I believe that brings us to our non-restricted agenda items. We're going to take these out of order quickly. We're going to take number 3 first, as a result of. Is that correct, Madam Secretary?
Non-restricted number 3.
3. Okay, let's have number 3 first then. We're going to take that out of order. The rest will occur in order. So let's let item number 3. Let's let it go forward. So please step-
Non-restricted number 3 is the application of Diana Bennett for finding of suitability as trustee and beneficiary of the G. Scott Menke Gaming Trust. It is also the application by the G. Scott Menke Gaming Trust to pledge membership interest as noted on the agenda.
Welcome.
Thank
Good.
you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Madam Secretary. I am supposed to be a placeholder for Mr. Gimbiano.
Gimignani, is he
Gimignani?
going to queue in on Zoom?
He's supposed to be on Zoom, yes. Dennis Amrine, Chairman of Paragon Gaming Compliance Committee. I'd like to introduce you to Ms. Bennett, who's the CEO and shareholder of Paragon Gaming and all the various entities.
Welcome, Ms. Bennett. Please state your name for the record as well.
Thank you. Thank you for all the members and Madam Secretary for this.
Your name is Diana Bennett for the record?
Yeah, I was Diana Bennett. So
Go ahead.
we're just here, my partner passed away 2 years ago, and so we're trying to get all of his affairs in order, and this gaming trust is one of them.
Thank you. Would you like to wait for, I think Mr. Gimignani is now on Zoom.
I don't think we need him.
No, really? Don't tell him that. I think he's a SEMA and he's time out of his schedule. Mr. Gimignani, are you there?
Hi, I'm Greg Gimignani of the law firm of Jacobs Wright. Board members Watkins, Katsaros, and Chair Gibson. Sorry for the delay there. I was on, and it was took a little while for it to promote me to a panelist. Since the introductions have already been made, you clearly know who Diana Bennett is. I mean, she's a pillar of the community here in Southern Nevada. She's a member of the Business Hall of Fame, second generation member of the Gaming Hall of Fame, and her contributions to the community and her accomplishments are far too great to mention in the time that we have. And I certainly couldn't do justice to it. But we do look forward to your approval of this agenda item. And with that, I'll turn things back over to Dennis and Ms. Bennett.
All right. Mr. Gimignani, would you take us through this application or through the items on the agenda? Can you do that? Or would you like someone here in the audience?
Sorry, you're breaking up a bit.
Would you please take us through the items on the agenda?
Sure. Currently on the agenda, there's an application for a finding of suitability as a trustee and beneficiary of the Scott Menke Trust. I believe there's also an approval of a pledge as well. Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, just getting stuttering here on the Zoom call. And hopefully you can hear me.
Okay.
I apologize for the bad connection.
Is there anything else, Mr. Gimignani, you'd like to provide in your affirmative? Is
No,
there anything else, Mr. Gimignani, that you'd like to provide?
I'm sorry, I can't. I'm having a difficult time hearing you. I don't believe there's anything else.
Well, enjoy SEMA. Thank you for appearing.
No,
Right,
thank
so-
you.
Please, do you have an affirmative presentation you'd like to make?
No, we don't. I think the applications are fairly straightforward,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Let me open it up for questions then. Thank you. Please.
I don't have any questions or concerns as it relates to this application. I'm happy to support it.
Thank you.
I'll just go ahead and reiterate with the applications that we're actually considering here today. So we've got a finding of suitability as a trustee and a beneficiary, as was mentioned with the G. Scott Menke Gaming Trust, and then we do have a pledge there as well.
Correct.
The intent was that there's some outstanding debt, correct? You want to walk us through that just a little bit?
Okay, well, over the years, as Paragon has grown, there were certain investments that were made in various companies. I would make the actual investment, and we would have this pledge for Mr. Menke to have 50% of that. The thought always was that he would start paying it off Unfortunately, that did not happen, and he passed away before we could move on to that.
I agree with the statement. It's rather straightforward. I didn't have any other questions. I just want to walk through that a little bit.
Yes, I understand.
Okay, and so the collateralized loan will cover most of the proceeds in the trust. Is that accurate?
Yes, at some point in the future.
Well, my condolences on the passing of Mr. Menke. He was a well-known person and beloved by many here in the community. So thank you for appearing on this. I don't have any concerns or issues. So you're well known to us, and we're glad to have you here in the industry. So if one of you'd like to make a motion, I'd be grateful.
I'll make the motion. I move to recommend approval of non-restricted item number 3 as read and directed by Secretary Ruber pursuant to the condition that the G. Scott Menke Gaming Trust shall not declare or issue any dividends or distributions of any type, whether it be income derived from gaming or any interest, stock, or securities in a licensed gaming operation or holding company to any beneficiary or the beneficiary's heirs, transferees, or assigns unless such person is licensed or found suitable by the Nevada Gaming Commission.
Okay, Madam Secretary.
Member Katsaros?
Aye.
Member Watkins?
Aye.
Chair Gibson?
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And we'd like to thank Agent Chamberlain for all her help as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Madam Secretary, let's go back to number 1 then.
Non-restricted number 1 is the application of Pioneer Topco LP for approval of a distribution.
Okay, welcome.
Good morning, Chair Gibson, Member Katsaros, Member Watkins, Madam Secretary. Sonia Vermees, shareholder with the law firm Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck, on behalf of the applicant Pioneer Topco LP or Topco. Also here this morning, Daniel Cohen. He's a partner with Apollo Global Management. He also sits on the board of managers of Pioneer Topco GP, the general partner of Topco. Monta Azzolina, she is a principal with Apollo and is also on the board of managers. And also Robert Brimmer, he's the chief financial officer for the Venetian. If I could, I'd like to take you through the application just briefly, and then I would ask Mr. Brimmer to come up. He will provide an overview of the financial information that supports the application. Some of that is set forth in a deck that's been provided to you and that we've asked to be kept confidential. I also won't get into a lot of the private equity history and structure and things like that that have been provided in a confidential white paper that I hope that you have all read and that was included in your materials.
Okay, thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Topco indirectly holds all of the equity interests in Venetian Las Vegas Gaming LLC and other subsidiaries that hold the operating assets of the Venetian. Topco acquired these assets from Las Vegas Sands Corp. In February 2022, following our lengthy presentations before you and the Nevada Gaming Commission. The acquisition was funded through equity capital from Apollo, fund investors and co-investors, and a senior secured term loan facility from the Sands. The equity investment included approximately $50 million allocated to the Venetian's balance sheet to ensure that the business was well capitalized from day one after the transaction. Affiliates of Apollo also provided a first lien senior secured revolving credit facility to fund the ongoing capital needs of the Venetian. Topco now proposes to recapitalize the Venetian to a modest capital structure and distribute cash to the ultimate equity holders and employees of the Venetian. As you will hear from Mr. Brimmer, this recapitalization plan is supported by the Venetian's very strong financial position and a pending favorable financing transaction with JP Morgan Chase Bank. Regulation 15C-200 provides that without the prior approval of the Commission, neither a private investment company nor that company's affiliates who have been found suitable by the Commission shall declare any dividends or distributions on any class of securities to any person who has not been licensed or found suitable by the Commission. Topco and its registered limited partner affiliates, Pioneer Management Co-Invest Holdings LLC and AP9 Pioneer Holdings LP, are requesting approval to distribute capital to the direct and indirect equity holders that invested in Venetian. Topco intends to distribute $620 million and also provide awards to its team members. And now I'd like to bring Mr. Brimmer up, and he will go through some more of the
Okay,
support on this.
Please. Mr. Bremer, please come forward. State your name for the record if you would.
Morning, Chair Gibson, Member Katsaros, Member Watkins, and Madam Secretary. My name is Robert Brimmer, CFO of the Venetian. I think in front of you, you have some pages that we shared confidentially, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to take you through the financial performance and really an exceptional start that we've had during the first 8 months of owning the Venetian. In these pages, I'll take you through results, both financial and non-financial, elements of our strategy, a little bit on our outlook for the business, but in total, I think that provides very important context for the transactions that are at hand, and shows that these are very reasonable financial transactions to undertake. Moving through this first page on page 2, to begin, our financial performance has been exceptional and well above our expectations. We're currently run rating north of $600 million of EBITDA for the business. Relative to the 2019 pre-COVID period, we're up nearly 27%, and this is a very broad-based recovery across our business. You're aware of obviously the strength in the gaming numbers, but the hotel, food and beverage, and most importantly our MICE business are all recovering very nicely. To us, it appears to be a very durable recovery. In fact, our most recent numbers for October it's the best month that we've had in the last 10 years of the business. So tremendous financial strength, which point to this is leading into tremendous cash generation in the business, given the strong operating performance. Currently, we have just over $300 million of excess cash on the balance sheet that we don't need to run the business, nor do we have immediate investment needs that we can fund in the short term. We have broader investment plans that we'll go through at a high level, but those take time to finish our designs, to source FF&E. So this money is sitting on the balance sheet. It's earning a 2% interest rate, which is below our investors' cost of capital. Therefore, it's just very unproductive. Point 3, the value creation plans. That's kind of our internal nomenclature for controllable management initiatives. And we have a set of items and actions that we're undertaking to improve revenue, to improve the efficiency of the business, to drive service and drive employee engagement. These are very important to us. We're executing well on these. We're in the early innings. We've generated $50 million that's reflected in our results. But there's probably 3x this that's unrealized that we have line of sight to that we'll get after in the next 12 to 24 months. Given this context on financial performance and the cash in our outlook, we're asking for authorization to right-size the capital structure, and I'll go into what that means a bit more in detail. And at the same time, use cash associated with that issuance to right-size the balance sheet to redistribute cash to our investors. Alongside that, a number of months ago when we bought the Venetian, we announced the Venetian Las Vegas Appreciation Award, which got some coverage in the local press. It's very important to us. It's allowing all of our full-time team members to share in the upside and the improvements in the business and the accretion to equity value. We think it's the right thing to do, but more importantly, it creates a culture of accountability, a culture of ownership, and all of our team members can impact value through impacting service and running the business better day to day. As part of this overall transaction, given the increase in equity value, we're contemplating a distribution. I don't want to go through the numbers here because we want to keep that for a town hall that's forthcoming, but a meaningful distribution to all of our team members is part of this overall transaction. Finally, as Sonia mentioned, our counterparty here is JP Morgan. I'll go into some of the features of this debt security, but the most important is that there is a feature called PIK. We have the ability to pay the interest expense by issuing more of the security, which is very important given general economic uncertainty and our ambitions to invest and improve the assets. So this doesn't create any additional fixed costs on the business, which is important to me.
Sir, could I ask you to use the instead of abbreviations, use PIK because this is a PIC structure and there might be some confusion over that on the record. And
Yeah, it's Mankind.
PIK.
Acronym is PIK.
Yeah.
Yep. And then finally, there's a revolver of 100 million to provide additional liquidity needs to the business. On page 3, this just gives some graphical context for the financial improvement that I alluded to. Relative to the performance of the business for the 12 months before closing, results have improved 47%. Relative to the 2019 period, which I mentioned earlier, results are up nearly 27%. What's not shown on here is the financial performance of the business really for the 2020 period, and that's what was relevant when this capital structure was put in place and when the deal with Las Vegas Sands was when the PSA was signed. And the business at that point in time was generating negative cash flow. So the capital structure that we have reflects the financial situation that existed at that point in time. We're in a very different world now, which is really at the heart of this argument for adding additional debt capital and creating a more balanced, more efficient capital structure. Moving on to page 4, we've shown 4 high-level KPIs here. Honestly, I could have picked almost any KPI off of our first page dashboard. The business is robust, it's stable across all metrics. On the hotel side, on the left, occupancy has increased from a little bit of shortage in Q1 due to Omicron, but it's been incredibly stable. Rates have been incredibly powerful. We're 20% plus growth versus 2019 in standalone rate increases. On the right, our slot performance has been remarkable. We're gaining share. We're increasing units. We're looking to invest in this element of the business. And you can see on the graph here, we've maintained win per unit despite adding more capacity to our floor. Food and beverage checks continue to increase. We've invested in this part of the business. We launched Tao Beach earlier this year. So we're seeing broad-based strength in checks, and spend per check is up and very resilient.
Before you go on, could I ask you a question about hotel occupancy?
Yeah.
Well, prices of rooms. How have the prices varied from January 9 to October 16?
Yeah, the largest year-over-year increases were during the early summer period, kind of May and June. That corresponded with very high group demand at our property, but also in the business, which allowed us to really drive pricing on FIT demand within the Venetian. So we had, roughly 30% plus rate growth versus 2019 during those months. It's been fairly stable in the mid 20s, 20% range versus 2019 through Q2 and through Q3. And then October, I don't know the final numbers, but that's going to look more like the May, June, just given the tremendous demand in the city and pricing.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to page 5, I think this is a framework that Mr. Sandberg showed previously. It really summarizes the investment thesis into kind of a base case and upside. Moving left to right, I think this investment was always predicated on the assumption that we would see a recovery from COVID. That's happened fully and sooner than we expected. Revenue optimization and other initiatives. I'd say that we're in the early innings of this. We've made a number of improvements to drive better utilization of the business, to use the assets more, use our bars more, use our theaters more, invest in gaming capacity to capture latent demand.
So, Mr. Bremer, can I ask you to dig into that euphemism there?
Sure.
So, identified optimization initiatives, what does that mean? And what kinds of things are you doing?
Yeah, it's a broad list of initiatives, a combination of revenue. There's some efficiency. There's some that are pure service plays. It's a mixture of those things. So revenue would be looking at changing our hotel mix from a model that was appropriate historically that Sands followed to a different model, given our view on opportunities. We're looking to expand gaming capacity to target new certain segments that are underserved within the Venetian. Our theaters, for example, we have 4 theaters. They're utilized 150 days per year, which is about a 10% utilization rate. So 90% of the time they sit there. So we see great opportunity to use the assets that we already have to a greater extent to drive higher revenue, to service customers better. the Sphere. That's going to be operational hopefully in a year, and we'll be a major beneficiary of that in our business. It's a combination of things like that to improve the business, to drive higher utilization, more profitability.
Okay. Member Watkins, please.
So do you attribute the Venetian's strong financial performance to these unique things that have taken place since February of 2022? Or is this something that you might think is part of the broader trend?
It's both. There have been market tailwinds. Everyone in the marketplace is seeing tremendous growth. Caesars reported numbers yesterday. I do think that what we're doing is differentiated. I do think that we're gaining revenue share and profit share. So we're certainly benefiting from broad market tailwinds, but then there are things that we're uniquely doing to run our business better that are partly reflected in these results.
Two quick follow-ups on your opening there. You're talking about optimization. When you talked about efficiencies, what efficiencies are we talking about? And then on the hotel side too, are you talking about a different mix of suites versus other offerings or other types of rooms?
Yeah, I mean, efficiency to me just means that we service the demand better. That could be through.
When I hear the word efficiency, I guess is what I hear of is, cutting, employees and so forth. So I just want to understand when we're talking, say, efficiencies.
Yeah, that hasn't been part of the playbook so far. There have been no changes to the workforce. There have been no changes to benefits. In fact, we've increased benefits. We've added back 401k match. We've added back tuition matches. Labor optimization is going to be making sure that we have the staffing aligned with business levels. And that wasn't always the case. We can provide better service at a lower cost. And there's a page in here that demonstrates that on casino beverage. Similarly, for a function like in-suite dining, we have peaks of demand there that we can't service very well. There are very long wait times. So by getting our labor staffed appropriately, or take front desk check-in, that comes in peaks and waves. We have certain times where we have very long lines. So taking the labor that we have and matching it better with business volumes will result in better margins, better customer service, better profitability.
Okay. And then on the hotel side?
The hotel side, it's really more of a philosophy around what percentage of room nights are used for the MICE business, for the meetings and convention business, and what percentage is used for casino. And given the strength in the casino business, it was less of an emphasis under previous ownership. That's where we see the opportunity to drive a higher mix, invest in the gaming product, and higher revenue and profitability.
Okay, and then since we started to touch upon more revenue optimization type of things you've put in place, one of them you highlighted already was an increase in number of slots. It looks like you've increased at least a couple hundred at this point. And I think during years past, they were probably at levels even higher than where you're at right now. Is that the trend that you're looking at doing? Is instituting a bigger slot floor?
Yeah, absolutely. That was part of our business plan for this year. When we look out to next year, it's going to be more slot investment. We're going to find ways to expand the gaming floor. When you look at the amount of casino square footage that we have relative to hotel rooms, we're among the smallest in the marketplace. So expanding the casino floor, adding more slots, it's all part of the playbook. We think there's an unmet market demand, and that's part of what we're doing.
Was that something you guys instituted straight away, say, March? Because we're only a few months in, right?
It was very, very closely to our ownership period. We put in orders to buy more games, and we finally got above the 2,000 unit mark just back G2E. We expect that will continue to increase next year.
And your win per unit hasn't suffered. It's
Correct.
increased.
That's right.
What if I can ask, what's your total FTE count as compared to 2019 at a high point, say end of the year?
I don't have that figure in front of me. It hasn't changed materially. It didn't change materially under Las Vegas Sands ownership. There wasn't a material change to staffing, and it hasn't changed under Apollo ownership as well. So there's been some attrition that we have not backfilled, but there have been no material changes so far.
Okay, and so you attribute any decline in total numbers of employees to attrition?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions before we move on?
My question can wait.
Yeah, I mean, just on upsides, I think capital projects, our CEO, Patrick Nichols, has made comments in the media in the last couple of weeks about our ambitions to invest to grow this business. We met with our board last week and discussed these plans, and we think this is the key to unlocking a lot of value in the business. We're going to touch most of the hotel rooms, common space, entertainment, restaurants. We're working through our plans right now, but this is a big part of the investment thesis. And importantly to me, the transactions that we're contemplating here are consistent with this strategy and don't affect our ability to execute on this capital-based growth. And then finally, we're always looking for M&A or ways to create network effects around the Venetian business. We think it could be a marquee asset that you can build around with regional assets or other Vegas assets. So that's something that we're analyzing as well.
Okay.
Moving on to page 6, this gives you a bit more color into what value creation means and what we've been doing. In the upper left, customer service, we had unacceptably low casino beverage scores. This is a net promoter score, which is supporters minus detractors. And we fixed this. And this was not through hiring more people or fewer people. It was through using our workforce, scheduling them along with business demand and giving them the right tools to deliver a high level of drinks per server hour. So through very simple changes to how we scheduled and how we trained our staff, we were able to drive meaningful improvements in casino beverage scores, which we think will translate to loyalty, longer play, and revenue. So that's one example of how efficiency results in profit and service improvements. In the upper right, once again, the broad-based incentive plan. This applies to all full-time employees in the business. We want people thinking like owners. We want people looking to improve the business, to drive service, and share in the financial success and equity value creation of the organization. In the bottom left, we've announced a couple of new food and beverage offerings. We have many more to come, but we're excited to add more experiential F&B to the business. This is a Haslan and Mazone, which are Middle Eastern concepts that they're going to go over near the Wynn connector bridge. And then finally on entertainment, Freestyle Love Supreme will start with us in November. This is a show that was produced by Lin-Manuel Miranda. And this is going to be really our first foray into putting Venetian entertainment back on the map. Moving on to page 7, obviously a lot of numbers on this page. I think that there are a handful that are important to me as CFO. If you look in the middle of the page, there's a line, net leverage. And you can see at the time of closing, when we look at the net debt on the business relative to the EBITDA we produce, our leverage was 3.2. If you look just to the right of that, the leverage pro forma for the transactions that we're contemplating is 2.8. And relative to market benchmarks and comparables, a lot of our competitors on the strip and throughout gaming are in the mid 4s. Some are higher than that. But this is a very reasonable level of financial leverage. And it's very high quality, favorable debt. When you look at the interest expense associated with this, our ability to pay this in kind and not have a forced cash interest obligation gives us tremendous coverage, which is the simple ratio of the EBITDA the business produces divided by the cash interest that we're obligated to pay. And that ratio is over 11 times. So we have tremendous coverage on the debt service pro forma for this transaction. Moving on to page 8, once again, this just highlights that the capital structure remains conservative and the features in this new security with JP Morgan are very favorable for us as the borrower. There's the limited cash interest requirement that we can pay this in kind. There are no maintenance tests on funded debt, so we don't have to worry about a leverage test that would cause a credit event or an event of default. And then finally, we have the ongoing credit support from Las Vegas Sands, where for at least 2022, if our earnings were to fall below, if our EBITDA were to fall below 500 million, they top the business up to that level of support. So there's this ongoing credit support provided by LVS. And then finally, to wrap things up on page 9, once again, this just compares our financial metrics at closing versus pro forma for what we're proposing. Net leverage, it's gone down due to the earnings improvement in the business, due to the cash generation, even with the issuance of this $500 million note. Annual interest expense is higher, but all of this 53 million holdco note can be picked, which we may choose to do if we have higher use investment opportunities. We will deploy the cash to those opportunities and pick this security. Maturities are long dated, so there will be no near-term maturities that will cause any events of default or near-term obligations on the business. Then finally, we've talked about the backdrop and the financial performance of the business, which really supports these transactions. That's it for me. I was not planning to go through the last couple pages, which are a little bit technical, but happy to take any questions or give it back to Sonia.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mr. Bremer. I'll open it to questions. Please.
How has management changed? Maybe this isn't a question for you, but how has management changed since closing? It was my understanding that management would remain the same, at least for a certain period of time.
Yes, I mean there was change at the CEO level that happened several months after the ownership change. That was a decision by the board of directors. Otherwise, there's been some attrition, which is always expected in a strong labor market. We've had some folks leave for other opportunities in competitor businesses. But beyond the CEO change, there haven't been any fundamental shifts or reorgs to the management team.
How has your the diversity of your upper level management changed?
I don't know that it has changed. The CEO change was a man for a man, so that was neutral. I don't think the diversity within the senior management team has changed since closing.
Okay. Would you like to look further into that to examine it and maybe report back? Or are you just speaking from a lack of knowledge, or is that your representation? Or
it could be a lack of knowledge. I'm happy to investigate that and talk to people who may be more qualified to answer that question than I am.
Okay, I'd appreciate a follow-up.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to dive back into the financial side of things again.
Sure.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. Basically, that you have a very reasonable level of leverage post, assuming you get the approval for this distribution. But I do want to, and I see that you highlighted a bunch of the benefits here, of course, but when you guys acquired the operation in February, what were you modeling at that point from an EBITDA perspective? Do you recall?
I do. I mean, our
You said it was based on 2020 numbers, correct?
when the capital structure was put in place, that was based off of a very different time in the world. The business was negative cash flow. It was unclear how quickly the business would recover. In the initial underwriting, we assumed it would be a multi-year recovery. We're several years faster than what we anticipated. Even this year, we're exceeding our business plan by over 15%. So given my expectations for the business in February, when we put together a business plan, we're beating that for this year as well.
So when we received the application, I think it was filed in June, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
For this app,
For this application, yeah.
the end of
Sorry, I
June, beginning of
jumped.
July,
Yeah.
yes. Mhm.
So that would have put you at about, what, 4 months of operation then? You had March, April, May?
Yeah.
Not even all of June, so 3.5 months at that point. So at that point, when you were looking into the future, obviously, well, when you filed in June, the amount was, I think, significantly lower, maybe 15 to 20% lower than the distribution that we're talking about right now, correct? Because that's changed since the June number even, right? You've levered up a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean,
Excuse me,
the
you have a-
increase in the distribution reflects the financial performance. The earnings of the business have improved materially. It was in the high 500s. Now we're going to be in the low 600s. And then associated with that, that would be the cash generation of the business. So both earnings and then also the cash we generated are both factors that go into our view that the full 620 million should be distributed.
And I misspoke just a second ago. You didn't lever up. The additional funds were coming from cash on hand that you didn't anticipate originally, correct?
Correct.
And that's where we get to, say, the $700 million figure.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the $500 million note issuance, that's been a constant.
What
The
is,
illustrations were based on 100 million, and it's actually been 300 million.
and what was that number based on? How did we get to the, say, go from 600 to 700 million?
I mean, it's primarily just the cash generation in the business. I think that we may have had certain assumptions initially that we could deploy capital more quickly than what we actually have. We have some great ideas, but they take time to materialize and for us to find the right designs and buy the stuff. So there would have been an expectation for CapEx in June that's lower this year, and it'll be pushed into 2023 as those plans materialize.
So it's fair to say the market and your operations have been outpacing anybody's expectations. At
Absolutely.
the beginning, when you purchased the operation in February, were you anticipating a distribution so rapidly?
No. I mean, we knew that there was, at that time, our capital structure was over equitized. There were inbounds that I got from various investment bankers suggesting that we should look at changing the composition of debt and equity
Right away.
right away, like early. But once we saw the performance recovery, the sustained recovery, and the growth of the business, it made a lot more sense.
So had you had better foresight at the beginning, would you have been thinking about the distribution straight away and filed that application with your acquisition? Or just restructured the financing altogether?
Yeah, I think the priority was to close the transaction. We learned more after we closed it. We looked under the hood, seen the trends continue to get better.
And it took time to negotiate too, as well. So we weren't in that position back in at the beginning of 2022.
Took time to negotiate
Negotiate with JPM
with JPM.
Yeah.
So was that negotiation done by June already?
For the
financing?
When we filed, absolutely. In
Okay, I
fact,
didn't know
the
if that was
JPM
unfolded.
term sheet was part of the submittal.
Okay, understood. Yeah, because we have all the materials here. I don't know when the
Right,
timing of that
right.
actually occurred. So I guess I'm trying to understand, because when you had your forecasting at the beginning, you didn't anticipate the windfall that you've seen. How do I know that? Should I be concerned that maybe you're not looking into the future properly now, and we could potentially see a recession, and that we could possibly be putting the operation employees at risk, economic risk, if you're not foreshadowing properly here? So with your forecasting now, have you built in the potential for a recession? And
We
talk
have.
to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when our team forecasts, we like to be conservative. That applied 8 months ago. That applies now. We want to put numbers out there that we can beat. And with respect to recession, yeah, that's not our base case. Given everything I've seen in the business, the forward indicators and forward bookings, that's not what we're planning for. But if that happens, we have the capacity to absorb that with this new capital structure. And we have the series of controllable initiatives, which I discussed, and we can do those. We can improve the business regardless of the economic headwinds or tailwinds.
Because if I look at the application, what we need to consider is under, what is it, a 15C 200?
Yes.
And it really, to distill that down, is
is there any financial concern or financial stability concern? I get you're going from, would you say, 3.2 times to 2.8 now, correct?
Yep, that's
So
right.
that's good. So it doesn't really jump in my face to say there's any cause for concern here, but I am looking at, we're 4 months in now, we're already looking for a distribution. Is that a typical timeline for you, or is there a typical timeline under which you normally see a distribution after a close of acquisition?
Well, I'm not the one to answer that question. You know, I run finance for the Venetian. To answer your first question about kind of leverage in a recession, once again, I believe 2.8 is reasonable, and not all debt is equal. Like our 2.8 can be picked, so it's not applying any new cash obligations to the business over our entire horizon. So it doesn't affect our cash flow in any way.
That pick feature, is that a quarterly decision that you get to take?
I believe so. I believe it's quarterly.
I think that's what I read, is just looking at tacit sort of confirmation on that point. Had you looked to get financing, because I think I heard the word favorable financing right now. We're looking at a significantly higher interest rate. Are you saying favorable for the times?
Well, it's favorable in a number of senses. It's favorable that it can be picked, which provides tremendous flexibility. It's certainly favorable when you look at the cost of the financing versus where capital markets are right now, which are dislocated. It's very favorable in that context. Finally, when I think about cost of capital for the overall Venetian enterprise and trading off, a 10% note versus more expensive cost of equity, this is favorable. It lowers our cost of capital. When I take forth investments to our board, I have a lower hurdle rate by virtue of this financing. So there are a number of ways that it's favorable to me.
And the interest would be one that is not favorable, because if you would have secured this type of financing, say in February, it probably would have been significantly better, correct?
Maybe so. I'm not a capital market expert.
Nor am I, so I'm just asking you. But it seems as if interest rates have generally jumped up, and so that's why we're seeing a double-digit number here in the interest rate.
Well, this interest rate was negotiated in June, so it was a market rate at that time, given our financial profile at that time. Since then, interest rates have increased, spreads have increased. So what we have here in front of us is now much more favorable given our performance and given where capital markets have moved.
So it was favorable for the time is what I'm getting at. It's even more favorable now given the rates continue to go up, but less favorable had this decision been taken earlier on.
I think that's true.
Okay.
I just wanted to point out that had they been a public company, they could have made the dividend anytime without coming before you for an approval. We're in a unique circumstance that they are a 15C company, so we have to file the application and time it right. And thank you to your corporate securities team for moving it along. We had an end of year deadline to get this done, and they were able to do that for us. So we appreciate that. If I can just, because I don't want to forget, I wanted to go back to Member Watkins' question on the diversity. I don't know the full makeup of management at the Venetian, but I did want to point out that the board of managers, in addition to Ms. Ozolina, there are 3 additional women on that board. So it's an evenly split board that's overseeing the Venetian.
So to set the stage for the crucial conversation, as some would put it, let me take you back to some of the history or precedent that we have at the board here for considering these dividend recapitalizations, requests for dividend issuance. So we had Station Casinos in 2015, and that was, that became an issue. That was an issue that I think you were involved in, Ms. Vermees.
Well, my firm.
Your firm.
Yes.
And do you recall the total amount that they wanted to?
I don't.
Okay.
No.
Well, let's say around $70 million. And then we had a 2017 request by another private equity firm, and it was roughly $75 million. $75 million for distribution. That was the total request. So we don't have a long track record and much experience with dividend requests, especially debt-driven or financed capitalization dividends. So let's talk theory a little bit here, if we can. So there's discussion in the financial world about these early dividends, especially debt-driven dividends and attempts to artificially inflate IRR. It's going to increase the management companies' fees. What are your thoughts on that? And then talk about the aggressiveness just of coming back 4 months after the approval and asking for a distribution based on that's really funded by debt.
Yeah, I don't have an informed opinion on either of those. I can tell you why this makes sense for me as a CFO.
Maybe I should answer this. Chair Gibson, Member
Yes.
Watts, Member Casaros, Member Watkins. I want to actually go back to one of your questions.
Your name.
Daniel Cohen for the record. I wanted to actually go back to your question because I don't think Rob maybe was the one that should have answered that. When we signed this transaction about 1.5 years ago, it was in March of 2021, we were obviously underwriting the transaction at a very different point in time in history. When we closed the transaction, we were on the recovery, but we didn't own the business. We were just getting under the hood. We just inserted Rob as the CFO. We didn't know all the optimization opportunity that was actually going to, happen so quickly. We didn't even know what the business plan was. It took us 3 or 4 months to actually figure that out. We, as you noted, we did bring in Patrick Nichols as the new CEO. We brought in Rob as the CFO. All of that took 4 or 5 months to actually transpire. And so where we are now, which is when we made the application in June, where we are now is that we've actually gotten very comfortable with the business. We've seen how much more opportunity there actually is than when we underwrote it. And so that's why we're very comfortable making this distribution and right-sizing the capital structure to where it is. In terms of your question on the IRR, again, because of the point in time that we're making this application and we're closing the transaction to begin with, this was never the intent. We're not doing this for any IRR maximization or anything. We're doing this to return capital to our investors, which are predominantly pension funds and other institutional investors that give us their money in order to make positive investments for them. The Venetian Resort Las Vegas has been an incredible success for us so far. We're not doing this for IRR maximization. We're doing this because we think this is the right thing to do for our investors and for the property. What's really important to note is that when we signed and closed the transaction on February 23rd, we thought that we should be operating the business with $50 million of cash. Even because of how much performance has improved over the last 4 months, when we close this transaction, we're going to have over $150 million of cash. In addition, we're going to have a new partner with JP Morgan that's going to be supporting us going forward.
And I think the point where Chair Gibson was just saying, I'll echo it, is that we haven't had a lot of these, and this one's largely funded by debt, not cash.
And I think, and I mean,
that's where we get into. I think we have one example where we have an anomaly, a very minimal amount of that happening. So we have to sit here and decide. We have to sit here and decide at what point would it be too much. I don't want to tell you how to run your business. I get that, but on the other hand, we've got to be mindful because we have the regulation sitting in our face. And we have to say, okay, at what point do you put the financial stability and risk of the operation at risk?
Right.
And so do we just defer to the banks? And if they're giving you financing at 10%, 20%, should we care? We got to have a discussion about this at least. I will, again, level that. I get the leverage, the level that we're at doesn't rise to a level of concern for me personally. But it's 4 months in, so it's like, wow, are we looking at another one here, another distribution here in a couple of months?
Yeah, no, we're absolutely not. So, and by the way, and I wanted to jump up before, when we closed the transaction in February, we had never even contemplated this. The answer to that question would be, number one, this is what we do at Apollo. This is what we're doing. We make all of our investments of what are the right capital structures to set up our businesses for success. I would say, while this is the largest, there's never also been a time when we closed a transaction and bought a casino that was losing $1 million a day in the middle of the pandemic. And so when we closed this transaction, as Rob said, it was over-equitized. We bought the property for $2.25 billion. We put in $1 billion. In a normal environment, we probably would have put in roughly 30% of the purchase price in a traditional leverage buyout. So we would have put in $500 to $650 million. That is roughly where we are going to after this transaction, because when we closed, we had to put in that $1 billion because of when the financing was put in place. So while it is the largest, we don't necessarily view it as, we're not taking so much a dividend as we're right sizing to the point of where it should have been had the markets been, more normal. And I would point out that the dividend it is large, and it is much larger than anything you've seen. But while it is a $600 million plus distribution, really only about 450 of that or so is coming from new debt. The other is really coming from the cash generation that was not anticipated at closing. And I know he's very conservative. We are all very conservative when we model these. We had no idea the business would perform as well as it has. This has all been a very positive surprise for us. More importantly, though, when we think through the future and we think about what could be a potential recession, that's why we were so focused on all the features that we all sat there and said, we're not putting any additional risk on this business. So the payment in kind feature was incredibly important. The long maturity was incredibly important. And to your question earlier, 10.5% for a note like this in today's environment is impossible. So when this was put in place back in June, this is incredibly favorable for the property. Had this been put in place today, that number would probably be 14, 15%.
And had it been put in place in February?
Probably in the same 9 to 10 range. So rates started spiking probably right around actually when we were getting close with JP Morgan to finalize this. And I know you asked this question earlier as well. This was fully committed by JP Morgan. They are fully committed to close this transaction. They're not allowed to walk away. Those commitment letters were put in place in June when Sonia submitted the application.
And I'll just redirect on one of your comments that you just said there. We had no idea the success that we're going to have, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I just hope we have an idea what we're looking at in the future.
Yes,
You're
and-
forecasting now.
Yes, and I would caveat, we had no idea because we didn't own the business.
Yeah.
So of course we did our diligence, but we also did buy the business from the outside. We were operating under the information that Sands had provided us during the diligence process. We own, over our Apollo's inception, we've bought over 200 businesses. It's hard for us from the outside, to really figure out exactly what we were going to be doing. We're taking investment bets. We had an idea that MICE recovery was going to happen. We had an idea about all the upside from affiliate marketing, CapEx initiatives, but it wasn't until we got there, until we actually met everybody, until we understood everyone's motivations and understood exactly how everybody was going to run the business, that we were able to actually really thoughtfully put a detailed business plan together, which Rob and the team have done over the past 4 months, very thoroughly presented to the board several times on. And now we feel very, very comfortable. So we had no idea 4 months ago. We feel very good about the position that we're in right now.
Has Apollo made other similar distributions as it relates to other gaming assets?
So to other gaming assets, I don't recollect anything that happened as quickly as this one. But in terms of other investments that we've made, this happens very frequently, that we purchase businesses and as soon as the markets return or the businesses generate cash, that we make distributions. Obviously, those don't require approval, so it's not typically as public, but that is very common.
Absolutely. It's not as public, and my concern is related to, gaming assets specifically.
Yeah, I don't believe that we have done that for another gaming asset, but I can confirm.
Okay.
Can you just walk me through the thought process that you go through every quarter, whether you're going to, select the pick feature or not?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and I don't want to commit to it now, but just given where
I'm looking for a commitment.
Yeah, given where rates are today, and given how much capital we have publicly said that we want to invest into the business, which is over $1 billion in the next 3 to 4 years, I would expect that we will mostly pay in kind. We will take a quarterly decision depending on what the cash at the business is, as well as what our capital needs are for the next 3 to 6 months, as Rob mentioned, depending on where we are in the design process, depending on where we are in a procurement process for equipment, and we'll make that decision. But I would expect that we will pay in kind to preserve cash generation in the company.
Okay.
I mean, we want to make sure that for the next 12 to 18 months, we're very downside protected, hence why we're leaving $150 million of cash plus the $100 million working capital facility. So we'll have $250 million in excess cash.
But you feel like you need additional cash reserves as well?
In addition to 250, it would purely depend on how much capital we're going to be investing in that period.
Because you said you're likely going to select the pick feature. So, okay.
Because I think the capital plans that we're trying to pursue, if we can accelerate them, we will use that. We'll use that cash to accelerate that capital deployment as quickly as possible.
So how does that thought, or how does that decision get determined? Though, who makes the conclusion on that? Makes the decision on choosing the feature or not?
So Rob, the CFO, will make that decision. He'll present it to the board, depending on what the budget and what, how the forecast for the year is shaping up.
So like prior to the end of the quarter, whatever, a week or two, that meeting happens then on a regular basis every quarter.
Yes. Now that we're a private business, we speak very, frequently in terms of he understands what's happening with the business, is making sure that the board is always very apprised of what he would recommend.
What's the total amount due at maturity, assuming the payment in kind option?
So it will be roughly $1 billion in 8 years. Raymond? I think it'll be roughly $1 billion. So it's a 10% pick over 8 years. So mathematically should be about $1 billion.
I think the number was 1.27.
Yeah. And that's in that would be in 8 years from now. Yeah, it'll be in 8 years from now.
8 years.
It's 8 years, yes.
So I've done some stress testing. We in corporate securities have done some stress testing of this model under assumptions that are sort of worst case scenario assumptions. So 10% decline in revenue from 2020 numbers and 10% increase in, so your 10% increase in expenses. And I don't really think the issue is debt coverage ratios. This is not really at its core whether or not you can pay debt. There are a few issues that we should probably talk about. I mean, one is the last experience of private equity here in the state.
Understood.
And I mean, that was one of the reasons why the last time you came through 4 months ago, that capital structure was appealing, one that we could all support. And I mean, it was in stark contrast to a $28 billion acquisition with TPG of Caesars.
Yeah, we understand. And so when we actually rolled out our Venetian Appreciation Award to everyone, Monta and I both got up on stage to all 8,000 team members to explain this because we do think it's really important. When we purchased Caesars in 2006, and we signed in 2006, we closed at the end of 2007. We had purchased it at the time where gaming revenue in Nevada was the highest it's ever been, the absolute peak of the market, literally to the month. Gaming revenue, as you know, dropped 20%. We had put in a capital structure at the time that made sense, and that was right at that time. I don't think anyone could have anticipated a recession that did in 2008 and 2009. It is in stark contrast to where we purchased the Venetian. We purchased the Venetian at a time when gaming revenue in the state was the lowest it's ever been in history because most of the casinos were still either shut down or recovering and had COVID-related restrictions. When we purchased the Venetian, we were legitimately losing $1 million a day of cash flow. So run rating for the year, we would have lost $350 million in cash flow for the year. It was a very different point in history. More importantly, we did not have experience operating casinos at the time when we made that acquisition. That was the first time we had ever operated a strip asset in a meaningful way. We've learned a lot through that experience. And while it was trying, I did not personally work on it, but I know Mr. Samper did, who I know you guys know as well. We've learned a lot, and a lot of what we've been doing very quickly at the Venetian is to mitigate any of the problems that we had identified early on at Caesars and to try and learn from those mistakes, create efficiencies, and to really hit the ground running, hence why we've been able to operate so well in the first 4 to 5 months. And we understand the concern, of course.
Well, another issue that I'm thinking through is just signaling to the market. I mean, given the fact that you're a private equity firm, there are certain notions that persist out there in certain communities, right? And one of the questions will be, are they going to strip assets without any appreciable benefit to operations? And so this is 4 months in, not a long time. And that's something that we have to deal with that as a board, whether or not we're taking a conservative and responsible approach to allowing debt loads and leverage ratios to change.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that is not our plan here. Is to make us as much investment return for all of our investors, for our for our management, and most importantly, for all the team members that now share in equity. That is, of course, a plan. We are trying to grow the value of the Venetian and take it as large as we possibly can. So we understand the concern.
Well, why not $1 billion distribution then, as opposed to 700 in this case?
Utilizing the excess cash, because we have,
or just levering up more.
Because we want to keep it to a conservative capital structure. I mean, we are still keeping the business to less than 3 times leverage. Had I called JP Morgan and had Rob spoken to them more aggressively, I think they probably would have given us more leverage. And I think you said this before, is just rely on what the banks will give you. I think the banks would have given us more.
Because
We don't,
sometimes they're wrong.
yes,
It seems,
we,
based on history.
yes, we did not want to take that. We wanted to lever it up to a very conservative sub 3 times leverage capital structure. We think about things also in a loan to value. So the value of the whole property versus how much debt we have. We think we're well below 50%. Which again, in a traditional LBO, we would be at 75 to 80%. And so those are all part of the considerations. The capital plans that we have and we want to invest to grow the property are large. And so investing over $1 billion in the next 3 years, it would be nice to have an extra $150 million to be able to accelerate those plans really quickly and not have to wait for the property to generate that cash flow in order to do that.
And you're probably looking at this process as somewhat of an anomaly for you, given that you have to get approval to get a distribution. And as Ms. Vermees had said, had you been a PTC, you could have done what you wanted. But when you filed for your application, you chose to go this path, probably because the PTC route would have been a little messier. So it is what it is. So the onus is partly on us now to figure out whether or not to recommend the approval for you to do this, because as Chair Gibson was saying, we don't want you just to come in here, strip the asset, put the operation at risk. We've got to look at it from a state perspective and operational perspective as well. So,
yeah, we understand. Of course, that is absolutely not our intent, but we understand the concern.
And I would add that in the context of what my colleagues have already stated, but also given the lack of precedent at the board for these kind of debt-driven or finance distributions, that having all the facts up front is important to us. And having the information about the amount of the distribution, although that's not addressed clearly in the regulation, we have the discretion to determine whether or not the amount originally requested is, is the amount that should be recommended for approval to the commission. So I think it's important for us to have a clearer understanding, and as early as the exact amount of the distribution, we should know.
Yeah.
And so I would follow up by asking, when exactly was it that you became aware of the total amount of distribution?
So when we made the application, we filed an estimated number of $500 to $600 million.
Right.
That's
yes.
correct.
Everything was illustrative and it was going to be based on cash
on how much cash was in the balance sheet at closing. We have generated excess cash since when we made the application in June through November today. That exact number, it doesn't need to be exactly precise, but that $620 million number that's presented in here, that would be the exact number at this point of distribution that we would make to the shareholders, management, and the team members.
Right. So my specific question is, when exactly did you become aware of the total amount of distribution you'd be making?
So the final number was presented to the board last week by the company.
By who?
By Rob, the CFO, and the CEO.
Okay.
Is that accurate? I believe that we inadvertently found it in the confidential presentation.
You mean your own board, not our board?
Right. But
the company's
was
board
just finalized over the weekend.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And
the board of
and it was
managers
based on their meeting that they had last week.
So it wasn't directly presented to us. It was presented in the materials, is my understanding.
It was always presented that it was illustrative, and we always understood. And if I didn't communicate that properly to your team, I apologize. We meant to always communicate that the plan was, as we get closer and we see what cash is generated, that's when we're going to make the determination. And everything that had been presented through the investigative process was always an example, illustrative. They had the meeting last week. The presentation deck was finalized over the weekend and submitted to the executive secretary Monday morning.
Right, but it was never presented directly to us outside of those presentation materials. Is that correct?
Not a number. No, that's correct.
And so my point is, I think that it's important for us to have an understanding of those exact numbers sooner and be directly presented with them. As you can see, we were handed these presentation materials, within the last couple of days.
Yes.
So confidential presentation materials.
And I told your agents that I should have reached out to them immediately. Absolutely. But I was sort of watching to see how that was going to play out the numbers myself.
Real quick on the employee benefit here. I won't get into figures. Could you just talk a little bit about what you're willing to share?
Yeah,
You don't
absolutely.
have to talk about a number.
No,
Just
no,
talk about how it would roll out.
Yeah, so what we did when we closed on the acquisition of the property is to all full-time and full-time flex team members, which represents approximately 7,000 people, employees of the Venetian today. Every single person identical. So whether you're a line cook or a CEO, everybody is getting exactly the same amount, which was a share of the profit that we were going to generate. We had told people, to everybody, that we expected that number will be about $10,000 per person. When we sell the property, or ultimately when we monetize and make distributions like this, we're expecting, I don't want to say because it will probably get picked up and we're actually going to unveil this assuming we get an approval. That number will, be a large percentage of that $10,000 that every member would share.
So that's a component of that 10,000 is what you're talking about.
Yes.
Got it. So an
Because this is
payment, if you will.
correct. It would be, yes, exactly. The plan would be to communicate that in December, assuming we're able to close this transaction at the end of November.
So, I mean, if you were to propose, what do you think appropriate boundaries are, controls are for private equity in the context of when distribution should be allowed and to what degree? Do you have anything that you would offer to us?
I mean, I think, the onus is on us as the investors to make sure that we're making appropriate capital decisions when we buy these companies. We are very actively working with all of our companies and the board of managers of all of our companies to right size things and make sure that we're optimizing the capital that we have. I don't exactly know what the right guardrail for that would be, but I guess this is what we do for a living, and we're trying to make sure that we always think keep our capital structures of our businesses appropriate. So we will continue to do that every quarter, work with our companies.
And I ask the question again because, as I noted, we just don't have much precedent here in this space with regard, especially with dividends, with recapitalization dividends, but two, with dividends of this size.
Yeah.
Was there any thought process to just waiting until you had ample cash to do the same type of distribution?
Yeah, I mean, we evaluated all considerations, but again, just given we have a responsibility as well to return capital to our investors, and given we didn't think it was the right capital structure and how much capital we have invested into the property at this point, of course we always consider these things, but we felt this was the right thing to do.
Okay, fair enough.
Which, I believe you said it already, but for the record, if you didn't, which employees would qualify?
So all full-time and full-time flex team members. And this was communicated publicly to all in town halls in February when we closed. So it's about 7,000 individuals.
And from what point in time do employees need to be full-time to receive a distribution?
Okay, so yeah. So it's actually based on anyone who's employed the day before the closing date. So we're not differentiating based on seniority, based on time.
Position, anything.
Every single person will get the same amount. We actually made that clear to everyone so that everyone does. I know Rob talked about it. We're calling this the red coin campaign, but we want everyone to think like owners. And even in those town halls, when we unveiled this, people started raising their hands, giving us ideas to start charging for parking or to start doing these other ideas. And that's what we want. That is all what's been contributing to the performance. We have seen such an increased level of employee engagement and satisfaction since we closed on the acquisition, and that's really important to us.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
I don't think I had any more questions for them.
Yeah. So
Happy to deliberate.
as an attorney, we're trained I've been trained to defer to private business and under business judgment rule provisions, and not substitute my own judgment for that of people who are experts in running businesses. That said, this is a very different forum and it's the context is entirely different. We really do have an obligation to protect the reputation of the industry, and also to ensure that you're not signaling the wrong thing to the marketplace and to the people that work for you and that live here in the state. And so my concern is with regard to the 200 million, let's say we take $200 million from free cash flow, right? That's not so much of a concern for me. It's the debt derived capital or dividend payment that really is a concern for me. That's where I have concerns. And it's given the fact that it's 4 months in, and did you choose today with Jerome Powell's upcoming discussion?
Sorry, did we?
With the Feds?
No.
Was that fortuitous?
No.
Okay. Well, I mean, so there's an uncertain future. I mean, I'll say that analysts on Wall Street, you know this. You're one of them. You're a Wall Street person. What they're saying is, so I was in this seat when we were in the middle of the pandemic. I took over, shortly after the 78-day closure, and most analysts didn't believe we were coming back until 2024. It happened much sooner and in a much more aggressive, robust way than we expected. There are analysts that are saying that they don't expect the bottom to drop out, but they believe that the jurisdictions where there's been very rapid ascension in valuation and in spend, that there'll also be some appreciation potentially in 2023 with some, with tighter markets and especially with some interest rates rising. So I guess the first thing, I mean, you know this, I mentioned that I've tried to stress test your model, and that's not the fundamental concern. It's a concern. Precedent's a concern. Optics are a concern. By optics, I mean signaling to the people and us doing our jobs. What are your thoughts, Member Casaros? You're a very laissez-faire, free market person.
I don't know if I signaled that. I'd like to beat this up some more. No, I mean, for me, it does come down to some precedent questions, timing, one, and the amount of debt that they're going to incur as a result of financing it in that manner. What I'm looking at doesn't seem to be problematic for me from a leverage standpoint. So that is kind of the core, what I'd say we're setting a precedent for. At some point, if they came forward with $1 billion, $2 billion, what does that look like then? Because we have to say time out. Maybe this isn't prudent because now you are putting the operation at risk because you are at a certain point. I don't think we're anywhere near that here, even if the floor does drop out. But that's just my personal view. And in the end, I'll go back to what I stated before. I don't want to tell you how to run your business, but we're here to question the decisions that you're making and whether or not you're going to put the operation of the state at risk here. That's what I see my role in this.
And Chair Gibson, if I can address the debt issue, I too am not a financial genius. Those that have decided that this is the right capital structure for this business. Mm-hmm. And as to the debt, if the debt was already on the books, which the company believes it should be, and we were making this dividend, we wouldn't be having this conversation about taking out debt to pay the dividend, right? Money's fungible. So if the debt was already on the books and we paid the dividend, that means we're paying the dividend instead of paying down the debt, and we get to the same place.
And that's kind of where my question was going. Had you done this in February? So I'm pointing to something that maybe wasn't the best decision, but I take everything in totality here as you guys didn't know what you didn't know at that point because you weren't able to get under the hood, right? Because I'm guessing you would have had better interest rates on that because it's pretty high there. But you got the pick feature. That's what you guys like. But you're thinking about utilizing that, which is just going to inflate your debt. But even if I look at the end of that trough, I can't in good conscience say no, you can't do this because I feel in my that it's too risky. I don't feel that way based upon the numbers. Even if the numbers, of course, the economy could always go where it's been before. I don't know, but I feel when we made a recommendation for the approval in February, you're levered at 3.2 times, now we're at 2.8. So I have even more comfort level. So that's kind of where I'm at. The timing is questionable, not questionable. It's not the right word, but it's like we're 4 months in. It's like, wow, really quick. So are we setting a precedent now where people get an approval the next month and they utilize the PIC structure? Because you could have went the PTC route. It probably would have been fun. When they come back the next month and say, okay, now we want to do a distribution. It's like, whoa, hang on. The dust hasn't even settled. You didn't have the foresight before that you knew you were going to do this, or maybe you weren't telling us before that you wanted to do this. Perhaps a little bit of open dialogue, but I'm not saying that's what happened in this case. And so that one does raise a red flag. It's like, wow, we're really 4 months in. What if they're not able to forecast properly 4 months later from now too? So.
What about your capital projects going forward? I mean, this would be much easier question if you're asking to borrow and to fund capital projects. What do you have forthcoming?
Well, we're still developing our plans for 2023. One of my frustrations is it's taking much longer than I thought to deploy capital. We have great projects, great ideas. They're going to generate financial return and be good for the business, for employees, for guests. It's a long lead time. Like we want to do rooms, but we want to make sure we have the right design, that it's an efficient room, but it's realistically, that's going to take 12 months. We're going to break ground late next year on Venezia rooms. And then after that, Venetian rooms. So the hotel rooms will be a big project that's late next year. As I mentioned, we have some ideas that are close to the finish line on expanding gaming floor capacity on some spaces that are vacant but adjacent to casino space. Some food and beverage. In our opinion, we need more nightlife and entertainment and ways to engage guests between 8 o'clock after dinner and midnight. So we're looking at using some of our assets to create a new experience. All these things are close to real, but they're going to be deployed. Like realistically, the big dollars will go out late in 2023. And I have this 320 million sitting in money market accounts generating nothing. So that's like for me as CFO, I want to make sure that we're efficient with the assets that we have.
Yeah, and just to give an example of that, by the way, we've already announced that Hostelon and Miznon will be opening up. The kitchen equipment that we've been trying to procure has 9-month lead times. And so we would love to move quicker. We are still dealing with supply chain constraints. Our capital, we haven't been able to spend it because we actually can't move as quickly as we would all like to.
Okay. I wanted to add one more thing. I'm willing to support this. But typically when we issue a recommendation on this, assuming if it goes that way, I don't know that we have guardrails in place to say, for instance, on the employee component, you could turn around the next day perhaps and just say, nah, we're done with that. If I'm given my recommendation for the approval here, it's based upon the information I have before me. And that is that we have a number in mind already for the employees. And if it goes below that, I'm going to be very disappointed that you misrepresented. And frankly, we'll come back and say, what say you to you guys to say, this is what we're basing the recommendation on. Okay.
Yeah, we could commit that for the record. The number that you have will be the number that will be paid out.
And have you all seen the condition as it relates to the number,
We have not,
the total number?
right, we have not seen a condition proposed.
There's a particular quote from a Moody's report that just keeps going through my head. So they refer to debt finance dividends as particularly aggressive. That's that's their coin phrase. And then they talk about when they're paid within a year after a leverage buyout. This is an LBO, but
Right.
after a leverage buyout, or they exceed 75% of a private equity firm's initial equity investment deal. So you're not quite to 75%. So yeah, I mean, I guess fundamentally, if I'm just looking at the transaction, the debt load is not overly heavy. I mean, you did come in with a very conservative number, and that was very helpful as an aside. The larger that debt load would have been, the harder it would have been to prove it. So, do you have any thoughts?
I'm not concerned with the leverage. My concern relates to timing. It's only been 4 months to debt in part debt funded distribution, and also the timing of when we were notified and how we were notified about the change in the total amount of the distribution. So I would like to see a condition that would limit the amount of the distribution. But I think we can open it up to discussion about what that amount would be.
And we're talking about distribution, the total amount of but not the employee component that I'm talking about, which is that number should be hit based upon, what you guys have disclosed to us. Okay.
And just quickly, before we get into that, before we talk about that, so the way these dividends would flow up, so they'd go to LPs, right, that are part of Fund 9, and then co-investors that are part of the Apollo Global Management Group. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. And just one thing, I know we keep saying 4 months. We will be 9 months at the closing of, assuming we close at the end of November versus when we sign the transaction, close the
The
transaction.
4 months was just the point in time at which you said, hey, we want to do this,
Understood.
when you filed the application, which I assume was 2 months before that is when you came to that decision. So
But we know we can't execute without getting things in place and filing the application and going through the investigation. So we know we can't trigger right away. So we have to start early in some respects.
And I do appreciate the explanation. I was concerned that maybe the plan was all along to come back, very, very soon after approvals or potential approvals.
No, and in fact, the restrictions on the JP Morgan loan would actually preclude us from distributing cash because they also want to see the same things that we're all talking about, which is that we can delever. So as part of the document, whatever our closing date leverage is, we actually need to lower debt by 0.75 turns, less than that before we can even distribute any additional cash.
All right, so we understand how the distribution will flow up, and we understand, I think, the parameters of it. Debt load after, assuming it was the full amount. So let's talk about potential amounts.
and I like the suggestion for a guardrail on the amount, just so.
So again, we have two instances of roughly $70 million dividend approvals. So this is quite a bit above that in terms of scale. So let's talk about it. How do we, in a logical way, how do we measure this? How do we refine it, and what do we peg it to?
Well, for me personally, I'm pegging it to what the request is and just comparing that and contrasting it to their financial performance. And so the amount that they're looking for, I wouldn't want to go beyond that because they haven't asked for it anyway. And I think that's a reasonable ask at this point for me. So I would probably peg it to condition it at that amount, right? Which you could do it a couple of ways. You say the distribution amount, it was 620, right?
620.
Or you do the overall amount of 700. So I'm open to either.
Please.
I guess my consideration would be the amount originally proposed versus the total amount originally proposed versus the amount that was changed as of last week, or from our perspective, the last couple of days.
The original amount, I would just add again, was 520 based on an illustration, based on thinking that there would be 100 million of cash. And as it turns out, pardon?
There were 200 million? It was 200 million?
That was 100. That was based on 100. And then leaving 50 million on the books. And instead they generated 300 million and are now going to leave 150 million on the books with the 620 figure. We're in a materially different place. And the original application wasn't meant to be, hey, this is exactly what we want. And that's why. Okay.
I understand that you all notified us that it may change based on the performance of the business, future business possibilities and outlook and things of that sort. But it's still very close to the time that we have to make a decision. Our report is based on the original numbers, and there's nothing in the regulations to guide us about whether or not the original amount requested needs to be the amount that we recommend. So that's within our discretion, right? And having that information so recently, that's news to me. Right. I understand that you all originally told us that the number may change. Would you consider $100 million a significant number, the change?
I'll let these guys address it.
You can answer that. I don't.
Like objectively, it's a big number for the size of the enterprise, and how well we've done. It's not. Our numbers, keep improving month to month. So given the outperformance, it continues to exceed my expectations. It's not a big number, given the scale of the business.
Yeah, if this were to take place in the future, I would really want to know earlier what the exact numbers are.
Mm-hmm. What made it difficult is the company didn't know. We had to file, and that's why we always tried to couch it in. We want it to be, based on where the numbers are at the time of approval. And they only finalized those numbers and made the decision on it last week. So the company didn't make that determination until last week. as well.
So if we can reframe this conversation a little bit. So rather than saying right size, I mean, that was a great size that you came forward with, by the way. There was an underestimation of market here, right? And the asset and how it would perform. And I think that's legitimate. I understand that. And I've been surprised myself month over month. I watched the numbers closely and I have been shocked to see that it's continued to climb. So I understand that. That makes sense. And you do have excess cash flow far beyond your projections. The debt load, if you borrow, is it 520 you said?
It'd be 500 additional.
Okay, yeah. And then you pay 50 to seller financing?
Yeah, so it's actually 450 of
Right.
additional total net leverage
Right.
because we also $50 million of to Las Vegas. Sorry, say this.
You go to the microphone. Sorry.
Oh, sure. It's actually only $450 million of additional leverage because we will pay down with the proceeds from this $50 million of the senior secured loan with Sands Corp. So that will go from 1,200 to 1,150, and this is an additional 500. And on a net leverage basis, we'll actually be well less than when we had initially submitted the application because of the fact that we're going to leave an extra $100 million of cash on the balance sheet.
This is also a very unique time. I just point that out. If this were a traditional market where we'd had, long running, averages where we could take, we knew where the numbers were at, and you were coming, let's say 4 months, the application was submitted 4 months after the initial approval for a dividend of this size, I would be an absolute no. But given the fact that we're coming out of a pandemic and there's so much that's not predictable, I'm willing to, allow for a cushion given that fact. That's an important item, I think. I mean, none of us had any idea we'd be here today, right? So I think if we frame, if I think of it in terms of, what happened, how you came in, what the basis for your projections were originally, and why you believe that right now the distribution is not going to be problematic based on ratios, even with very difficult scenarios that we've run internally. I would say to the market, the private equity market in general, this is not a practice that I favor. I don't like this notion. I don't look on if there's an approval with an equity structure, a capitalization structure, and then there's a turnaround within 4 months and a request for dividends. Again, that's going to be a no. And I say that generally to the market, unless there's a really good reason. So this is a very unique case because we're coming out of the pandemic, right? So based on that, what are your thoughts, Member Watkins?
I'm willing to support the application again with a condition that it be limited to a particular amount. I'm still open for consideration of what that amount is. And I understand to your point that this is a new process for both of us.
Right.
Right. And so you come in saying, okay, the reg doesn't say we have to have an exact number. So why would you provide an exact number, right?
It
But
says you have to approve the dividend.
Right.
But I mean, you understand, right?
Yes, I do.
right.
And when I say, 4-month turnaround and, it's going to be no, I mean, there are exceptions, but the point is we don't want private equity to be seen as the type of business going to be stripping assets, right? That's what we don't want.
But from a policy perspective, we do want to encourage private equity
I
to
don't
come into
disagree.
Nevada and put their dollars here.
Right.
And so approving this application does do that. It does
Maybe.
send that message to the
That's-
market.
Okay,
That-
send that message if you'd like. 4-month turnaround, generally speaking, if there's not a market like we have right now, is not an acceptable practice. That's just my view.
Sorry, I think you hit that point. I'm not sure who wrote the white paper. I was just trying to figure out that. So you guys hit upon that point on that. But I think the reg itself is the right policy. It's written very well so that we don't constrain ourselves too much. But also we have proper guardrails so that we can condition it still if we need to,
Right.
because we need to regulate for the times. The times right now are going to be different than what they're going to be in 5 years, and they were different 5 years ago. So.
Yeah, so to my point, I'm just trying to express understanding that there is not necessarily guidance provided to you in our regulations about, the flexibility in that amount changing during the application process. So I understand that. for me, I like to have information. I like to be able to have time to digest that information, to do my research, to evaluate it, analyze it, that sort of thing. And I felt like I had a limited time here. And our reports are based on the initial numbers, understanding that you all did inform us that those numbers may not be the final number. So I would say, given the newness, that I'm willing to certainly be flexible, understanding that we are figuring this process out as we go.
Yeah.
Understand, and I think if we ever go through this process in a similar fashion in the future, it's important as part of our investigative closing conference to address this. We should have, at that point, probably the agents, should have addressed, well, what's the number going to be? And the conversation didn't come up, and so we did not mean for the board members or the team to be blindsided, for
Well,
sure.
I mean, you understand, they ran all their projections and ratios and everything else and gave us recommendations based on that. But I mean, luckily for you all, the good news is that the increase in numbers is based on free cash flow. So that's a good problem to have. All right, so not to exceed, let's get a number out there.
Well, the number they're asking for is 620. I don't know if that's, again, that the additional amount there was from cash anyway. So had it been additional debt, then that would have been like, okay, guys, we need to maybe delay it so we can digest a bit more given the newness of it. But, 620 to 650, I think would be the distribution amount if you want to frame a condition that way.
Okay, so not to exceed what is the total amount?
Yeah, I mean,
It will be 620.
620.
Okay. I didn't know if you're still hedging a little bit.
No,
I mean, unless you want to increase the
Maybe I'm
employee
speaking-
bonus.
It will be.
It doesn't make a difference on your,
If you were an
on your
increase in
financials.
employee bonus, I would go higher. But, okay.
Get a good G2E, it sounds like, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, $10 Modelos. You sell a lot of those things, I think.
So the condition will be that the distribution is limited to 620 million.
And we accept that condition, absolutely.
I won't underscore again what I said about the employees, so.
Right. That's committed. I mean, that for the record, that will be, that is committed, and that when we provided you that number, that's what the number will be. Sure.
Well, thank you. We appreciate the spirited and difficult conversation. It was important to have on the record. Just to create precedent for those who come after us and have to deal with these kinds of issues. So thank you.
And Mr. Cohen's application is pending. So if he goes against his word, he'll be in front of you in a few months.
Yeah,
You should have led with that.
Well, thank you all very much.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's
We'll need to motion.
let's have a motion, then, please.
Well, we still need to motion.
While you think about the motion, I will thank your corporate securities team. They are fantastic.
You've done a good job.
Hoffman down to Micah Teepee, and certainly Senior Agent Crowley. And thank goodness Senior Agent Crowley understands all this private equity stuff. I'm sure that what he presented to you was fantastic and you were able to digest it. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, I've been on the phone with our corporate sec people late into the night last night,
Huh.
up until almost till, well, we've been exchanging emails and discussions until midnight and early this morning. So there's been lots and lots of work that's happened on their part. I thank them too. They've done an outstanding job. So investigations, kudos to you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and make the motion. I move to recommend approval of non-restricted item number 1 as read into the record by Secretary Rupert on the condition that the distribution is limited to 620 million.
Okay, Madam Secretary.
Member Katsaros?
Aye.
Member Watkins?
Aye.
Chair Gibson?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Let's go to non-restricted number 2, please.
Non-restricted number 2 is the application of Mohegan Gaming Authority doing business as Mohegan excuse me, Gaming and Entertainment for an amendment to their order of registration. It is also the applications of Mark Brown and Jody Madigan for finding of suitability and or licensure as controlling person, officer, and or as key executive as noted on the agenda.
Welcome, Mr. Rubenstein. It's good to see you. Out
Good to
from the Far East, I see.
That's right.
Good.
From the Near East, I think.
Near
It's
East.
probably more accurate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Member Katsaros, Member Watkins, Madam Secretary, Mark Rubenstein of the law firm of Reed, Rubenstein and Bogatz here in Las Vegas, representing the applicants. With me today are the 2 individual applicants, Mark Brown and Jody Madigan. If it pleases the chair, each of these gentlemen is prepared to make some brief opening remarks and then respond to any questions you may have for them. After that, I'll return and we can review the draft of the Mohegan Gaming's fourth revised order of registration.
Okay.
If that is satisfactory, then I'd like to bring
That's great.
Mr. Brown up to the podium.
All right, let's see, Mr. Brown. Please come forward. Welcome, Mr. Brown. Please state your name for the record and tell us all about yourself.
Absolutely. Good morning, Chairman Gibson, members of the board, Madam Secretary. My name is Mark Brown. I'm a member of the Mohegan Tribal Council and the Management Board of Mohegan. Thank you for taking this time to consider my application for a gaming license in the state of Nevada. I was born in Norwich, Connecticut, but moved around a lot due to being a son of a three-war career Army veteran. Our mom having to raise three sons many times on her own. She was clearly the toughest one in the house. She was always proud that all her boys had given time and served in roles of public service. When her father retired in 1975, we came home to Connecticut, and I've resided there ever since. In the early 90s, I volunteered my time to help our tribe seek federal recognition. Proudly, the Mohegan Tribe of Indians of Connecticut received recognition as a sovereign nation on March 7, 1994. In 1995, I ran for tribal council, which is an elected position. I won a seat on a 9-member council, which also serves as the management board of Mohegan. I served the council continuously from 1995 until I lost an election in October of 2018. I was reelected in December of 2019 to fill a vacancy only to have the count challenged. This election was vacated by our council of elders, which eventually had me leaving in February of 2020. After much dialogue with constituents, I decided to run for the Tribal Council Management Board in an upcoming election. I was sworn in once again in October of 2021. I had the distinction of being the only board member to regain a seat after losing the previous election. During my tenure, I held the title of chairman of the Tribal Council and the Management Board from 2000 to 2005. Then in 2006 to 18, I served as chairman of the Internal Audit Committee. I am currently hold the title of ambassador. Prior to working for Mohegan, I worked in law enforcement. It was a career that I truly loved and I found it personally rewarding. When I was first elected to the Mohegan board, I was still working in the local police department. And as the workload grew, those of us that had other careers had to make that difficult decision on service to Mohegan or our current careers. I'm the proud father of 3 young men. My wife, Mary, of 12 years, and I live in Lisbon, Connecticut, which is very close to Mohegan Sun. It's all of a 15-minute drive for me to get to work, and my wife works in a local hospital about the same amount of commute time. Time is too precious to waste. With that, and without taking up any more of your time, I would again like to thank you for your consideration of my application for license, and I stand ready to answer any questions you may have for me.
Thank you very much. I'll open it to questions, please. Questions?
Yeah, thanks for the opening. It was a great opening.
That was
Appreciate
nice.
it. Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, it really covered a lot of things. So you've been there from the beginning then?
I have.
So Mohegan Sun, when did that get built?
Well, we
I won't
opened
get
in
the year right.
1995.
Sorry?
We opened in 1995.
And you started in 95?
Well, 95, we opened, 96.
96.
I started in 95, we opened in 96.
So were you part of, I mean, you were already on the tribal council at that point, so were you part of the team design, development, soup to nuts?
Yes.
Beautiful property, by the way.
Thank you very, very much. It's, it was an experience to watch to come up out of the ground. And sometimes, being around our facility for long periods of time, you don't appreciate what we've accomplished. You need to get out and see the other properties. It really gives you a feel.
You guys should be very proud.
I really appreciate
the
that.
dynamics of the marketplace have completely changed now, given
they
the
have.
advent of gaming all over the East Coast, the Far East over there. But yeah, again, great property. I didn't have any questions on your background, though. You've covered everything. There was nothing concerning in your background. Thank you for all the service that you have.
Thank you.
Given this country. And yeah, congratulations on your reelection. There was one thing, point. It sounded as if I think we were told that you retired and decided, I don't want to retire, I want to go. That was like a year.
No, there was, after I left, after the election I lost, I took a break. And then getting the phone calls from constituents and, are you going to go again? You're going to come back? And, to be honest with you, we all know whether it be local, state, or federal elections or tribal elections, not a fun game to play. But after talking over with my wife and knowing that the goals that we have is protecting our people, it was time to do it.
So how long were you on the sidelines for then, if you will?
Actually, 18 months, COVID
18
time.
Yeah.
Well, I applaud you for jumping into the arena, as it were, and for doing it even after losing an election. So your counsel, one of his partners,
Like
has
pull me like this.
the father of his partner, lost 3 consecutive elections, and then went on to be a very important figure in national politics.
It's fantastic.
So persistence is a critical item. So thank you for your service.
Thank you very much.
Yes, congratulations on your reelection. And I was curious about your retirement and return as well. Great comeback. And I don't have any questions or concerns as it relates to your application.
Thank you.
Before you step away, though, I will have some questions just on the overall business, but I don't know if those are better posed to Mr. Madigan or not. Okay, great. I will do that then. We'll hold on.
Yeah, I think Jody would be the best one for that because that's why we bring him here.
Sure.
Yeah, and if I can just say this, I mean, this is a per individual qualifier situation, but I just want to say that, I mean, I've talked to Sequoia Summermeyer, the chairman of the NIGC. When IGRA passed, I didn't know how it would work out. It's worked out wonderfully for many tribes. I respect the fact that you all have done so well, learned the business so well, and you're now exporting your expertise to non-tribal jurisdictional places.
And I could tell you our focus always was for many years to be that first tribe in Vegas.
Right.
It just took us a while.
So thank you. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Rubenstein.
Now I'd like to bring up Mr. Madigan.
Okay. Mr. Madigan, welcome.
Sure, I get all the tough questions. Good morning. Chairman Gibson, members of the board, Madam Secretary. My name is Jody Madigan, and I stand before you today in my capacity as COO for Mohegan. I have had the privilege of working for the Mohegan organization for almost 5 years now. For the first 3.5 as the general manager of their managed property in Louisiana, Paragon. And for the past 14 months in my current capacity as COO for the corporate enterprise. In my role, my primary responsibilities include helping guide the overall strategic direction of the organization and having the 7 general managers of our various properties report directly to me on a day-to-day basis. Before I delve too much into my history, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for your time this morning and for what I consider to be the privilege of asking you to review my application for a prestigious gaming license in the great state of Nevada. If my math is correct, I have been fortunate enough to have been licensed by 17 other gaming jurisdictions to date, but obviously being licensed in Nevada is truly an honor given its place in our industry's rich history. I would also be remiss if I did not thank Special Agent Chamberlain for all her efforts during my background investigation. She was extremely thorough, very pleasant to work with, and I enjoyed our conversation when she visited me at our offices in Connecticut. As for me, I was born in Illinois, but grew up in South Mississippi, hence the accent, where I also attended college at the University of Southern Miss, go Eagles, where I achieved both my bachelor's and master's degree. After graduating college in 1995, I worked in a few non-gaming related positions, but was fortunate enough to get my first casino position with Park Place Entertainment in Mississippi in the summer of 2000 as a financial analyst. As an aside, I say fortunate because I truly love our industry. I never thought I would have the ability to have an educated conversation about restaurants, hotels, marketing, entertainment, gaming, etc. I believe it is one of the most gratifying careers in business. If an individual has the determination, aptitude, and opportunity to immerse themselves in learning all they can about it, they can achieve great success. Anyway, back to my history. So shortly after getting my start in gaming at Park Place in 2000, I transferred over to Penn's property in Biloxi, Mississippi, Boomtown, where I spent the next 8 years working my way up through the finance department to director of finance, while also studying for and earning my CPA license in 2002. I had a fabulous mentor at Boomtown named Humbert Sinopoli, who taught me so much, including the gift of paying it forward by being willing to teach the next generation of bright minds in our industry, which I take that responsibility very seriously. I left Boomtown in 2008 to take my first step into tribal gaming, working for Soul Casinos in Tucson, Arizona, as their CFO. I left there in 2011 to open my first casino from scratch, as I was the second team member hired for Maryland Live in Baltimore. I was also the CFO at that property. I was there for 2 years before I left for a GM position in Miami. From 2013 to 2018, I held a few positions in gaming throughout various parts of the country. Some of the more notable highlights include working as the AGM for El Dorado before they merged with Caesars, at their property, West Virginia Mountaineer, working as a corporate senior vice president for Seneca Gaming in Niagara Falls, and for finally taking the GM role at Paragon, where we were able to take a struggling property and turn it into a thriving one by tripling their EBITDA in 3.5 short years. That success led to the humbling offer of Mohegan to take on their COO role, which is why I stand before you today. On a personal note, when I was in Baltimore opening Maryland Live, I started dating a very lovely young lady who lived in town. After a few years of dating, we got married in 2015, and I was lucky enough to be both a new husband and a new stepdad to 2 phenomenal children to whom I would give the world to if I could. We still reside in Baltimore, as Mohegan is kind enough to allow me to maintain that location as my permanent residence. The trade-off is that I travel a lot, more than 50% of the time, to both our Connecticut offices and to our 7 various properties throughout the world. More than 50% of my time is on the road, but it makes up for it by being able to be home on the weekends and spend time with my family, which also includes my wife's very favorite thing on the planet, our dog Wrigley. Yes, I'm a Cubs fan, and yes, I know my dog ranks above me on her favorites list. In closing, I would like to reiterate my sincere thank you for your time today, consideration reviewing my application for a gaming license in the state of Nevada. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, including such important things as why I would admit to being a Cubs fan, or perhaps more interestingly, why my wife likes our dog more than me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Madigan. I have just one preliminary question. Who was the CEO at Del Sol when you were there?
Who was CEO?
CEO.
Wendell Long.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I'll open it up for questions. Please jump in.
Thank you. Thank you again. Excellent opening. I think Mr. Rubenstein has whipped you guys into shape, or you guys do that on your own. I don't know. So well done. You've got a really lengthy background in gaming. Nothing concerning. You've moved around a lot.
I have.
I was trying to count the states. So as you're rattling them off, I have them in front of me, but you're probably around a dozen almost. Give or take.
Maybe not quite a dozen. I think 17 jurisdictions.
Yeah.
Some, different things, but I think I've actually resided in and or worked in perhaps 8. I think if I did my math right.
Okay. So since I didn't have any questions on your background, I do want to ask a couple specific questions just on the overall. Well, let's talk about Virgin first here.
Absolutely.
Las Vegas Virgin. Performance of the market's been going through the roof here.
Right.
How have you guys been performing?
As you know, not to where we'd like it to be. Better more recently. I think we had a couple. I heard our friends with Apollo talk about a lot of the tailwinds for the industry, and Caesar did a report, and I think the strip properties are doing exceptionally well. As you guys are aware, off strip properties, even in the corridor, generally have to have some overflow from the strip, right? So MICE business is coming back, not quite there yet, right? So we're starting to see some ramp up for that. We also are in the gambling business. Unfortunately, we had some players beat us pretty heavy last year for tables. We probably only held about 66% of what we should have. Statistically, so there was a little bit of a uphill there, but we're working with our partners. We know we've got some good ideas we believe coming up that are going to enhance the property. We still believe in and feel very confident in the long-term success of the property, but I think opening up in the middle of the pandemic, after being closed for a year, you have to reacquire that database, right? So that took some time, cost us some ramp up opportunity. We are doing well actually in the locals market, better than the predecessors did who operated the property. We're doing better in slots. Again, we didn't hold very well in tables, but where we are seeing opportunity, and I think where we're going to focus, is hotel occupancy is still about 10 points lower than it was historically, and we still haven't seen the international destination traveler come back yet, specifically out of Canada. And when we blast out to our database, the redemption rate is still a little low. I think there's still some reservation about maybe the Northeast coming to Las Vegas via the long flights and things, but we feel like there's opportunity coming with that. We're not really seeing revenue back too much, to be honest. I think there's definitely things to get us there, so we feel confident, and we're still very honored to be the first tribe to run a casino in the strip corridor.
So in the occupancy, if that's down 10%, I think is what you just mentioned. So it's a foot traffic issue as well as lack of.
It is.
Coupled with lack of conventions, which kind of go hand in hand.
It's both. So the levers are, normalizing table hold, right? Driving more MICE business to the total community, getting more foot traffic for occupancy in the hotel, and the destination travel are kind of our 4 levers we think we still have in front of us to pull.
Okay. But you said slot play is strong.
I think our slot play is better, well, at least historically, compared to where the property was in 17, 18, 19, our slot play is actually at or better than those numbers were.
Are there some improvements you guys are looking to make? Because you had made some before opening those. So I didn't know if there's anything else.
And yes, we still are. So we're, we obviously have a number of partners at the location. So we're working with them to do some enhancements to the property.
Okay. And then if we could just go internationally, South Korea.
So super excited about South Korea. You mentioned the Connecticut property, which I agree with you is a phenomenal property. I think it's one of my 5 top properties in the country, in my opinion. So we built that over 10 years in 3 different phases. We are building our South Korea project Inspire, which is the same size as the Connecticut property. We're doing it all at once. So we are opening a year from now, basically, give or take. Progress is great. We're on budget. We're on time. There obviously was a horrific tragedy in South Korea last week, which we're very sorry to hear that happened. And, we're an integral part of the community there. So we're involved in that process of helping heal. But I think from an overall project perspective, we're very happy with where we are.
Are you going to be restricted to offering gaming to South Koreans as well?
So we are not able to do that right now. It's a foreign only. We do have the ability, though, that if you are a dual passport, which there's about 2 million of those individuals in Seoul, they are allowed to gamble. And then, of course, one of the advantages of our property is we're right next to the airport. They're our landlord, so we have a very good partnership with them. So they're doing things like allowing temporary visas. So Seoul is a big hub for traffic. So if there's something like a 12-hour layover, a lot of times you can't leave the airport but we actually can get temporary visas for people to come visit our property for the time frame, and those things stay the night. And so we see a lot of opportunity there as well.
Okay. And then out of Greece completely now.
Out of Greece completely now. Yeah, we handed off to Hard Rock. So they're off and running with that.
And I'm pretty familiar with domestic, but anything else internationally happening?
Canada. So, we obviously are running the properties in Niagara Falls. So we have both Falls View and Casino Niagara, working with our government there. They actually own the properties and we pay to manage them. So, seeing good success there. Their profit is actually record highs right now. So, but still opportunity there as well. We're doing some investment in that area. So we see some good things coming down the road for our Canada properties.
Is that the property that was closed for an extended period of time?
18 months.
Okay.
Yes. So Canada had a complete shutdown for COVID. So we were they were talking about losing $1 million a day from a cash flow. Imagine the strip being closed for 18 months.
Well, no, I've had that thought actually. I mean, I've seen other jurisdictions, even in the US, casinos were the first businesses to be shut down.
Yeah, we were closed for 2. I was at Paragon at the time. We were closed for 2 months, and that felt like forever. 18 months is just, I tell them all the time, and to keep the team member morale up, to be able to. So they didn't lay anybody off. They kept pay up and those things too. So keep team member morale up. I think there was a 90% bring back, from the staff members. So attrition was almost nothing in that process. So great testament to the team and the leadership there.
Thank you.
So, normally it's Member Katsaros who mentions this, but clean applications for both of you individuals. Thank you for that. One question: what do you have a pipeline, any kind of program that solicits or identifies Native American youth that are of age to work in the gaming industry, and you train them up?
Oh, absolutely. So Mohegan takes that very seriously. So I've had the pleasure of now working for 4 tribes. Mohegan probably has the best career development program of the 4 tribes that I've worked for. I mean, I think that's one of the things that all the other tribes should actually strive to get to. So, we have, for example, our CEO is a tribal member. Ray Pino, he's actually a tribal member. We have 2 general managers. The one at Mohegan Sun, Jeff Hamilton's a tribal member. Cara Fox LaRose, who's our general manager of our property in the state of Washington, is actually a tribal member. We have a lot of senior VPs at a corporate level that are a tribal member. So, we definitely go through the pipe. The government does a great job of getting people out of college, getting them interested, communicating, talking about it, and getting them in the flow. So I think they do a phenomenal job with it.
Yeah, I mean, the preamble to IGRA, I mean, that's the whole point, right? Is to provide
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so I think, as a non-tribal member, when you work for a tribe, one of the first things you have to understand is your job, as much as it is bottom line focus, is also career development, making sure you're taking care of the tribe. Mohegan has a saying that 13 generations past, 13 generations to come, right? And so if that's your focus point, you're always thinking about making sure you're training, developing for the future.
Thank you.
I would just note again that you have a clean background, and I don't have any concerns, but just did have a couple of questions. Well, I would note that certainly from your background, it seems that you have a lot of integrity. So thank you for that. I think you know what I'm.
It's hard to be in a spot. Let's call it a number 2 spot, and to call out someone who might be above you.
Yeah, I knew that was going to, in my career at that location when I did that. But, I gave that individual an opportunity to fix it, We had a number of conversations about the topic. The individual opted not to fix it. So I thought it was my responsibility to bring that to the attention. So
That is a great measure of integrity. Yeah.
Yeah, talk about making good decisions in tough places.
Yep.
But what casino did you say you were at when you tripled EBITDA?
Paragon in Louisiana. So it's a Tunica Biloxi tribe. It's a tribal casino. They got themselves in a little bit of financial difficulty. They had to get a management deal for the bondholders. They reached out to Mohegan, so Mohegan managed that property. That's how I got involved in the organization. They actually wanted somebody from the South, speaks the language, can translate. So I knew somebody who worked at Mohegan. They reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in coming down and helping with your finance background and your operations background?" So I was there 3.5 years, had great success, and then that kind of led me to the position I'm in today.
And what would you attribute that great success to?
I think it was communication. I think it was rolling up our sleeves and really getting involved. I'm definitely a in the weeds, hands-on kind of sort of operator. So it was setting culture from the top. I think my very first meeting I had there, I'm super competitive too. So my very first meeting there, it was all about, hey, we're not going to fail, right? Here's the goal, here's the target, and here's what we're going to do to get there, and getting everybody aligned on that vision. Took a little while. Probably took about a year to get everybody kind of there, but I think the last 2 years we really showed positive success with that.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, and I appreciated your entertaining, affirmative presentation. And I would love to know more about why your wife favors your dog more.
She claims that he's a better cuddler than I am. I don't know if I buy that story, but that's what she claims anyway. So.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Rubenstein, do you have anything more to add?
No, I'll work with Jody on the Nevada thing. Though.
Well, I mean, I didn't want to say
my
that.
bad.
I wasn't going to mention it.
No, but that's my shortcoming. That's on me. I try and be thorough, and usually those things go unsaid. But
that's okay.
Anyway, the last part of business is the fourth revised order of registration.
You've seen it?
We've seen it. Draft number 1, dated October 6th. And we don't have any questions or concerns or comments.
Okay. Thank you very much for presentations. Great affirmatives. Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. With that, I'm willing to entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
I move to recommend approval of non-restricted item number 2 as read into the record by Secretary Rupert pursuant to the fourth revised order of registration, draft number 1.
Madam Secretary.
Member Katsaros?
Aye.
Member Watkins?
Aye.
Chair Gibson?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Madam Secretary, let's go on to number 4, please.
Unrestricted number 4 is the application of Masami Sasso for licensure as a key executive and director at Konami Gaming.
All right. Welcome.
Good morning, Chair Gibson, members of the board, Madam Secretary. For the record, I'm Glenn Light with the law firm Lewis Roker, and I'm appearing on behalf of the applicant, Masami Sasso, who is the Senior Vice President of Corporate Planning, Manufacturing and Information Technology. And he is also a director of Konami Gaming. In the audience are Tom Gingoli, who is the Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer, Secretary and the Director, and Laurie Oak, who is the Vice President for Regulatory Compliance. To begin, we would like to thank Agent Jamie Tan for her work on this application. She is a consummate professional and a credit to the board. With your permission, Mr. Sasso would like to make a brief affirmative presentation, and then we can answer any other questions you may have.
If I can ask a question just before Mr. Sasso jumps in. Is it true that there's a requisite that you have to be a UNLV basketball fan to be a part of Konami? Is that true?
According to Mr. Gingoli,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. I just wanted to double check that. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Line. Please step forward, Mr. Sasso.
Good morning, Chief Gibson, Chair Gibson, and the member Katsaros, and the member Watkins, and the Secretary. Thank you for your time today. For the record, my name is Masami Sasso. By way of the background, I joined Konami in 2014. Initially, I worked for the corporate planning department of the Konami Group Corporation, which is the headquarters of the Konami Group, and located in Tokyo, Japan. Over the next few years, I was promoted in within a Konami Group Corporation. And in 2017, I was appointed president of the Konami Digital Entertainment Europe and moved to the London, England. I served as the president of the approximately 3.5 years in London. And then in 2020, October, I was appointed a member of the board of directors of Konami Gaming Inc. And I relocated into the Las Vegas. And then shortly thereafter, my role expanded to including the senior vice president of the corporate planning, manufacturing, and IT. At Konami Gaming Inc., I'm accountable for administrative and risk management operations of the company and corporate management. I reported to the Mr. Steve Sutherland, who is the president and CEO of the corporate Konami Gaming Inc. Lastly, I also serve as a member of the Konami Gaming Inc. Konami Gaming's compliance committee and a member of the Konami Group Corporation's regulatory committee as well. I'm happy to answer any question if you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cecil. So you are now living in Las Vegas?
Yes, I live in Las Vegas right now.
How is it?
Oh, it's very hot in the summer.
Oh.
Yeah, very different from my previous location in London.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay. And you oversee, you're a strategist for the company. Is that right?
Yes.
So tell me what that entails.
Actually, when I was assigned in Konami Gaming Inc., we faced a pandemic due to the COVID.
Yeah.
So the company was faced very difficult situation of the business because most of the casino is shut down, and we have reducing our sales. But right now we reopened the market, and then the market situation is recovering. Our business is growing up right now. So my target is how we can meet our requirement of the demand and the demand of the market, and then how we expand business, and of course in Las Vegas and also in the US and in the globally as well. So this is my laws, how we can expand the company by the order of the headquarters.
Thank you. That was the question that came up during our room session, so appreciate that answer. I'll open it up for questions. Please jump in.
Do you have technology experience or manufacturing experience?
Oh, yes. So before joining the Konami, I was in touch of the automotive business. So this is my ex-company, which was founded my ex-father, the family business, and then I managed the factory of the automotive parts, and then I expanded the business to the global companies in automotives, and I familiar about quality assurance, and then how we can satisfy the customers, and how we can keep the production stably. So this is my background.
How do you think that experience has prepared you for your role today?
Today, I'm in charge of especially the corporate planning and the manufacturing IT. So especially for my manufacturing, I keep in mind to control the manufacturing, how we can maintain the stable production, even also that we are facing the supply chain problem during COVID. So, but right now we became a very better situations, and we can keep the very stable production supply to meet the customer's requirement.
How many direct reports do you have?
Excuse me?
How many direct reports?
Direct report to my report to the Mr. Sutherland.
How many do you oversee? How many individuals?
So we have in the manufacturing department, we have purchasing, and then the productions, and then warehousing and logistics. Each head of the department report to me. And then IT also we have a general manager of IT. He also report me, and the corporate planning he also report to me. That's it.
All right, thank you. I don't have any further.
Thank you very much.
Do you have purview over the system side as well as the machine side then?
Yes, both
Okay.
of them.
When you were just, okay, I didn't know if that covered everything. So how many total employees under your remit?
In the manufacturing, we have around 40 to 50 employees. In the IT is around 10 peoples, and then corporate planning, two members.
Okay.
In total, in the Konami Gaming Inc., we have currently the 450 employees.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't have any questions on your background. It came back very clean. If you want to just give a brief update on where the business is right now, you've certainly grown from the time that you started in 2000 and was it 14, I believe, to where you guys are at now. You guys have grown by leaps and bounds.
Yep.
So if you wouldn't mind, just give just a brief update on where you guys are at today.
Excuse me, what's the meaning of the question?
Sorry, just in terms of a quick business update in for the Konami Gaming at this point, where you're at right now.
Okay, as I explained, we are now recovering the business, and then almost we are returned to the pre-COVID situation.
Okay.
And then how we can expanding the new business fields, not only the slot machines, but also the more digital side as well. So due to the expanding of the new market in iGaming or because I have a background of the Konami Digital Entertainment, I manage the company in Europe, and then we expanding the digital business as well. So how we can utilize our technology of the Konami groups into the Konami Gaming Inc. This is also the new target of us. So how we are utilizing the group technologies.
Mhm.
So we also are expanding the gaming business as well.
Okay, internationally. strong.
International, yes, right.
Okay, because obviously you guys have been really strong here. I see that you guys had your first install for Synchro Sweat on the strip here about a year ago, give or take, and now you've got another. Oh, well, you had two perhaps now, if I'm not mistaken. Nevertheless.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I just wanted to get a quick update from you. No problems from the background. I'm happy to support your application here.
Thank you very
Good
much.
to see you again too.
Thank you very much.
A very good background. You're a lawyer. You're legally trained, right? You trained as an attorney.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Good. And what was the motivation behind you listing on the NYSE and trading on the London Stock Exchange and Tokyo Stock?
So the long time ago, the Konami headquarters are facing some of the financial problem.
Right.
So in order to getting the finance support, so that our founder, Mr. Kozuki, has a focus to the international supporting. So they decided to share in the stock market in London. So long time that we are getting the support from the international stock exchange as well.
Okay, thank you. All right. Are there any further questions?
I don't have any further questions or concerns.
With that, I'd ask for a motion then.
Thank you.
I move to recommend approval of non-restricted item number 4 as read into the record by Secretary Rupert.
Madam Secretary.
Member Katsaros?
Aye.
Member Watkins?
Aye.
Chair Gibson?
Aye. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much.
Madam Secretary, let's go on to number 5, please.
Non-restricted number 5 is the application of Keith Meester for licensure as key executive at BetMGM LLC.
Good morning, Chair Gibson, Member Katsaros, Member Watkins, Madam Secretary. Sean McGinnis with Butler Snow on behalf of MGM Resorts International. With me to my left is Pat Madamba, Senior Vice President, Legal Counsel for MGM Resorts International. To my right is Keith Meister, who is an MGM designated member of the BetMGM board.
Right.
And that's why he's here. That's the title, member of the board of members representatives, which is the title that we came up with at the September agenda when Gary Fritz came before you to be found suitable. Wanted to recognize Special Agent Jeff Zinn and his thorough work on this file. He's very professional and diligent. We really appreciate that. If it's acceptable to you, I was just going to have Mr. Meister provide a brief overview of his background, and we could open up to questions.
Please, let's do that. Thank you. Mr. Meister, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for all you do to support the industry. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Keith Meister. I grew up in New York City. I am the happy father of 3 young children, aged 12, 11, and 8. I went to Harvard College. I played football at Harvard College. I graduated in 1995. Since 1995, I've spent my career working in a variety of capacities in the investment business on Wall Street. I learned the gaming industry working for Carl Icahn. I joined the Icahn organization in the beginning of 2002. I served as CEO of Icahn Enterprises, the primary holding company for Carl Icahn. During that period of time, I was responsible for helping to oversee our investments in the Stratosphere, 2 Arizona Charlie's local casinos, as well as assets in Laughlin, Nevada, as well as assets in Atlantic City, New Jersey, the Sands Casino. In August of 2010, I left the Icahn organization and started my own business, Corvex Investment Management, which launched in March of 2011. We have a very simple business model. We want to buy good businesses at reasonable prices. And our sense is we get to buy, everyone wants to buy good businesses at reasonable prices. You get to do that when they're going through volatility or change, and you can hopefully look past that temporary change to find long-term solutions. I have a big belief in helping to partner with management teams to take one step back from an event and figure out how to turn that into 2 steps forward. It was that led me to making a large investment in MGM. I joined the board of MGM Resorts in January of 2019. I've been thrilled by the progress of the company over the last 3 years. I think we did take one step back and turned it into 2 steps forward. And one of the great growth opportunities that MGM had when I invested was in the digital space. And I'm very proud of the success MGM has had in helping to build that MGM into one of the largest leaders in the space. So I'm thrilled to be here today in that capacity.
Yeah, the way that the agenda is titled is interesting. I mean, so as an individual who's worked in government for some time, we're always criticized for, our committees to create a committee and so on. And you're a member of the board of members representative. I appreciate that. So,
in simple speak, I'm also on the board of MGM, and I am one of MGM's 3 representatives on the board at MGM.
Okay, that's good to know, actually. So in your capacity as a member of the board of members, what kind of information do you see? What kind of controls do you have?
Sure. We see budgets on a regular basis. We have controls over the money that is invested in the business. So I also serve on the comp committee, in which I'm responsible for helping to set the compensation and the alignment of interest for the team. So in general, I serve in a role that's responsible not for running the business, but for providing oversight, holding the team that runs the business accountable on behalf of the 50% shareholder MGM.
Right. Okay. We have enough for questions.
Yeah, just real quick. You mentioned your role with digital and the growth from the MGM side. Can you talk a bit more about that? What your involvement was there?
Sure. As an investor in the market after PASPA, we saw a huge opportunity for a company like MGM with a large database, great brand, great regulatory expertise, as evidence here, to be a leader in iGaming online, both for iGaming and for sports. I viewed it to be a very large market that was at its infancy, and that MGM would be very, very well positioned to take advantage of that. So part of my investment in MGM was predicated on what that future success could be and the value that would create to shareholders. And I'm very proud of the business that MGM has created over the last, can't believe, four odd years.
So how does that work then? So did you approach MGM and say, look, I'd like to make a sizable investment in your business, but it's predicated upon steps A, B, and C in digital world, or?
Well, I think we had alignment. It was obvious to the world that MGM was committed to growing there, but exactly what you said is accurate. I did a lot of diligence on MGM, and I showed up privately and visited with the board, and I said, you have a great company. I'd like to invest lots of money, but I'd also like to put my efforts behind it and join the board and help. Here's some things I think we can do that create a lot of value. The good news is they were very concentric with what the company wanted to do, and they invited me to join the board 2 months after that presentation. And I've been on the MGM board since, I think, January of 2019.
So would it be safe to say that your entrance into gaming then was with your time with Icahn Corporations when you were part of the team with Strat, Arizona Charlies, et cetera?
Correct.
And then, so was that the only experience you had
That's the only experience
since then?
that's the only experience I've had as a officer or director in gaming. Subsequently, in that period of time between 2007 and 2019, I followed the industry and from time to time made investments, but never served as an officer or director.
Once you get sort of your hooks into it, it's hard to get away from it. It's really exciting, frankly.
Totally agree.
As part of the Corvex investment portfolio, are you invested sizably within the gaming sector, or is that not a sector that you focus on?
It is a sector we focus on. We are sizably invested, but we are, I'd say, overly concentrated in one position, MGM.
Okay, understood. Could you talk a bit more about the Corvex investment strategy? I think I heard you say we try to buy low, sell high, or grow. Sorry, buy cheap and grow businesses.
Sure,
I get that.
Yeah, so that's the longer I've been doing this, by the way, keeping things very simple in the investment business is a great piece of advice. So buy great businesses at good valuations. Presumably everyone wants to do that.
Yeah.
So what we found is when a business is going through change, lots of public market participants create that view that change as permanent, and it's often temporary. So often a hiccup occurs, a level of volatility that affects a company, an industry, or supply chain that might be nothing to do with that company or that management team's fault. And Wall Street can be very short term, and everyone sells the stock, which provides an opportunity for us to provide capital. So what we say to our investors is imagine two concentric circles, one being fundamental and one being change. So when a business whose fundamentals we like is going through a period of lots of change, we want to provide capital. And it's often when businesses are going through change that they can benefit from having a shareholder who can act like an owner and help take the one step backwards from that change into how to reassess strategy for two steps forward. And that's our business model at Corvex.
Is there a particular segment or industry that you focus more on, or industries that you focus on, or is it just kind of wide open?
We're generalists by background. As a funny anecdote for the members, Corvex stands for core positions, V, value oriented, and X, cross capital structure. So core value, cross capital structure. When we started the firm, all camp, river, color, rock combos were taken. So we made up a word, Corvex, that describes our investment strategy.
I thought it was some sort of amalgamation of your wife's maiden name.
It is very similar. For the record, her maiden name is Corbin, so they happen to be very, very similar.
Okay, so it's a happy coincidence.
Exactly.
Okay. How many people do you have on your team with Corvex?
The core team at Corvex is plus or minus 20 people.
Okay. When you say core, so there's a wider team as well.
I mean, it's varied over time, and sometimes we'll use third parties, but in terms of full-time employees,
a couple of dozen. Wow. And headquartered in New York City?
Correct.
Okay. And that's where you're from, you said?
Born and raised.
How did you jump from, I think your background said Harvard, bachelor's in government to investment banking?
Recruiting out of college, I did a 2-year analyst program when I graduated college.
You're an analyst and then into it.
I worked for 2 years as an analyst at a firm called Lazard. I thought I'd go to Harvard Business School. After I applied, I was rejected, thankfully, and I scrambled to find a job. And I went to work for a real estate related private equity firm called North Star. I was lucky when I was working there. By chance, the person working on a deal quit. And as a young person, I had more exposure, and I was told I needed to negotiate a transaction with Carl Icahn. It was my Wall Street moment. It was very one-sided, but it thankfully gave me an opportunity to meet Carl. And one day I read in late 2021 that someone running his equities had left in a publication, and I called on him and begged him for a job. And it ultimately led to him hiring me in middle of 2002, excuse me.
And then you worked your way up.
I joined as an analyst, and it was a very merit-based place, and I was able to have a good relationship with him and do a decent job, and I moved up. Yeah.
We're going to see a movie on this at some point, your Wall Street moment?
I fully hope not.
Okay. Real quick, just roll on them, if I can pivot, just your role on the MGM as a board of, is it a board of member of representatives? Okay. Your role on that, similar to a board member on a PTC level where you're meeting quarterly. What's your role there? Talk to me about that.
There's two, as you guys I'm sure are aware, there's two owners of BetMGM. 50% is owned by MGM and 50% is owned by Entain. So as a private business with two shareholders, the board is a little more involved than a traditional public company board. On a public company board, you might meet 4 or 6 times a year. The BetMGM board meets monthly and holds management accountable for the budget and the plan that in what's been a very, very fast growing industry.
Yeah.
So lots of change.
You're probably aware of this, but I just noted as a member of the board that oversees the JV. So we've post PASPA, so up until PASPA was dissolved by the courts, we had a monopoly essentially here in Nevada, and so most of our laws were written for a very a brick and mortar based sports wagering construct. PASPA falls, and all of a sudden everything goes crazy. We didn't until recently try to adapt our regulations to accommodate our industry, that industry in particular, to allow for growth. We've been trying hard. We've made a number of changes to our regs. Cloud computing, for example, we've brought into a single place all of the service provider provisions. And I would just note, I ask that you try to make sure as a member of this board that Mr. Stoneback is in the queue, that he is as the licensee, that MGM is in control of the lines and numbers.
Understood. Thank you.
You talked about how you became a member of the board of MGM. How did you become a member of the board of managers for BetMGM? How was that decision made?
Right. The chairman of the board of MGM and CEO of MGM asked me to do it, and someone who was, MGM had 3 seats that we were going to take on the board, and we wanted 3 people who could add value and have expertise in the area. And we looked around the room inside of MGM of people who could add value, understanding the online gaming and sports betting business and the capital markets associated with funding such. They asked if I would do it, and I was thrilled to do it because it's a really exciting business. It's very rare you get to be part of a business that starts with a TAM of 0 and has the potential to be $20 or $30 billion with a partner like MGM who has such a large competitive position and a lot of assets to bring to bear.
Okay, thank you. I did have a question for the lawyers. I don't know if what happened in between the time of initially filing the application and the amendment to the application?
I assume are you talking about a particular investment?
Wasn't there an amendment to the application to request that the application, because that first application was for a manager and then it became for a key executive position?
Oh, this actually related to the issue that we addressed in September with Gary Fritz about how the board of members representatives would be handled. So what happened is when we got with Chief Hoffman and the staff, and we determined how it would be that the MGM entity would be licensed as a manager and a member, and the Entain entity the same, that we had to then condition the individuals. And by doing it that way, that changed them to key executives and licensure. So it was really just an amendment to make that flow with, he had filed originally as a manager because that's how it was originally styled, the way the first BetMGM applications came through and got approved. When it was discussed how to deal with the both member entities being members and managers, because it's member managed, how to address the individual there, that's when they got amended for that. So it was really just that.
I'll try to. We essentially were aligning with Entain on the way that we were filing applications for the board members. We were just making it consistent between the 2 partners.
Okay, thank you.
You've got a great product. And I just want to applaud you and thank you for the way that you manage the Beehive investment. It's a quirk of our laws. We're under reg. We require our licensees and applicants to follow all federal, state, and local laws. So regardless of what happens in the state of Nevada, which is maybe a contradiction, we still are looking at federal legal provisions and whether or not certain substances are legal. So thank you.
Completely understood.
So selling off the asset to a third party unrelated, that was exactly what we would hope you do.
Thank you. I'm glad it could get resolved.
Yeah, and I'll step in on that too. I wanted to make sure we address that at least because this is just one part of the process here. We make a recommendation to the commission. The commission is going to be the final say in whether or not a license occurs. It's for everybody. I will say, from at least my personal perspective, you were cooperative. We had some good dialogue. I think there was some some thought about divesting in particular manners. Of course, we don't tell you exactly how to handle it. You're an applicant at this point. You're not a licensee. Had you been a licensee, we treat things a little bit differently. So at this point, the onus is on you to convince us to give you a recommendation, as well as at the commission level. But I will say, just for the record, so that for the benefit of the commission hearing later on, which you'll go before, that you were cooperative and you divested in a manner, from my perspectives, wholly appropriate, and I'm satisfied with how it was handled. So thank you.
We had a robust and enjoyable conversation.
I like that word, robust. Yes, yes. We have a good dialogue, I think, between myself and your counsel here, both of you.
I'm also satisfied with the divestiture to a third party.
I will ask one question at risk of, Corvex. I asked about the industries that you actually invest in your personal capacity. That was the B House. Those were the B House investments. Again, divested to an unrelated third party, correct? Not a sibling, not a cousin, et cetera. Family
Correct.
member. Okay, good. On the Corvex side, do you direct and where all the investments go, or at least I would say all of them? How does that work in terms of
The answer to the question is yes. We run a one team, one P&L portfolio. So core means concentrated. We'll have our top 10 positions will represent 70 to 80% of our capital. And ultimately, while it's a team driven effort, there's one final decision maker on what we invest in. As the managing partner, I am that final decision maker.
Okay. Because I would just caution you to ensure that those investments too, since you are the principal majority owner of Corvex, to be mindful of the provisions we have within the resolutions as it concerns marijuana as well.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Are there any other questions?
I don't have any further questions.
Let me just double check. I don't believe I do either. Oh, yeah, and I'm all covered.
Got
Thank
two
you.
lawyers, one individual. Good application. Thank you very
Thank
much. You're well protected and represented. So with that, I'd ask for a motion.
I'll make that motion. I move to recommend approval of non-restricted item number 5 as read into the record by Secretary Rupert.
Madam Secretary.
Member Katsaros?
Aye.
Member Watkins?
Aye.
Chair Gibson?
Aye.
Thank you.
Just one thing, Chair Gibson, I wanted to thank again your staff for all the help they're giving us and the support for the dedication, the Mirage transaction. Really do appreciate it, and also appreciate, completely unrelated, but really appreciate as well, meeting with Member Katsaros a couple weeks ago to talk about our new Leo Vegas investment. It's very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's go on to our next item, please.
Non-restricted number 6 is the application of GNLV LLC doing business as Golden Nugget for a waiver of Nevada Gaming Commission Regulation 4.080 as noted on the agenda.
Hello.
Good morning, Chair Gibson, members of the board, Madam Secretary. I'm Connor Shea of Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck. I'm here on behalf of GNLV LLC doing business as Golden Nugget. With me here, present to my left, is the GM and SVP of the property, Mr. Chris Latil. The application before you today relates to Golden Nugget's approval as an interactive gaming operator. As you know, this approval was originally granted in October of 2012. An additional approval was granted in 2018 when the company converted to an LLC. Today, we're requesting that the board recommend approval to waive the 6-month activation requirement set forth in Regulation 4.080 and extend Gold Nugget's interactive gaming operator license until the time of the commission meeting in November of 2023. That request would be supported by Regulation 4.080 subsection 4. At this time, I wanted to thank you for your consideration and your time this morning. And of course, I would be happy to address any questions which you might have at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is the 5th request for waiver.
That's
Do you have
correct.
any thoughts on that? I mean, just as a policy matter, I mean, should we extend, add into an item, or is there some deadline or point at which we should stop?
It's a stellar insight, Chair Gibson. I understand that this is a unique circumstance in that it's been waived on a number of occasions year by year. However, in this circumstance, the facts are that we are not in an environment where the company is in a position, as far as the regulations are concerned, to proceed into the business for which it was initially approved. And that's what prompts me to be here before you today. Obviously, from a policy matter, it's not always going to be that situation, but I think in the facts that are presented before you today, it's a little bit of a different situation, pardon me, because of the regulatory environment and the business environment has not changed sufficient that the business can operate and activate that license.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Please jump in.
I didn't have anything. Thank you.
Member Watkins.
I had the same or similar question as Chair Gibson, just about, policy considerations. One of the questions I had for our staff was, how many other companies are making these continual requests, but I'm at this point, I don't have any questions or concerns, other questions or concerns related to the application.
Thank you.
All right. With that, I'd ask for a motion then.
I'll make that motion. I move to recommend approval of non-restricted item number 6 is read into the record by Secretary Rupert pursuant to the condition that the waiver of the provisions of Nevada Gaming Commission Regulation 4.080 in connection with the approval granted in May 2018 shall expire on the date of the regularly scheduled Nevada Gaming Commission meeting in November 2023.
Madam Secretary.
Member Katsaros?
Aye.
Member Watkins?
Aye.
Chair Gibson?
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'd also like to thank the time and attention dedicated to this matter by each of your agents. Thank you.
Okay, we will take a break until noon. That's when until Okay, welcome back. We will begin our restricted agenda now. Madam Secretary, let's proceed with the items on our restricted consent agenda. No questions or issues with regard to these items.
Restricted number 5 is the application of Sartini Gaming LLC doing business at 7-Eleven store number 42064 for a restricted gaming license. It is also the application of St. Rose Parkway Holdings LLC for licensure to receive a percentage of gaming revenue as noted on the agenda, and the applications of Charles Finnegan Jr. and Martha Finnegan for licensure as a member and manager. Restricted number 6 is the application of Las Vegas Boulevard Holdings LLC for licensure to receive a percentage of gaming revenue from United Coin Machine Company doing business as Century Gaming Technologies, doing business at 7-Eleven store number 22070. It is also the applications of Charles Finnegan Jr. and Martha Finnegan for licensure as a member and manager. Restricted number 7 is the application of Crawford Coin Inc. doing business at Green Valley Grocery number 74 for a waiver of Nevada Gaming Commission Regulation 4.080 as noted on the agenda. Restricted items number 8 through 15 are the applications of Jet Gaming LLC doing business as Terribles Gaming, doing business at Terribles numbers 434, 435, 436, 437, 438, 439, 440, and 441 for restricted gaming licenses. Restricted number 16 is the application of United Coin Machine Company doing business as Century Gaming Technologies, doing business at XO Liquor MLK for a restricted gaming license. Restricted number 17 is the application of United Coin Machine Company doing business as Century Gaming Technologies, doing business at Jones Arco for a restricted gaming license. Restricted number 18 is the application of Eclipse Route Operations LLC doing business as Eclipse Gaming, doing business at Lucky Sevens Lounge for a restricted gaming license.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Would you like to discuss any of these items, colleagues? Pull any of them? No? All right, with that, I ask for a motion.
I move to recommend approval of restricted item numbers 5, 6, 7, 8 through 15, 16, 17, and 18 pursuant to the following conditions. As to items number 17 and 18, the surveillance system and/or mirror must be inspected and approved by the Nevada Gaming Control Board Enforcement Division within 60 days of issuance of the state gaming license and thereafter be maintained at or above the standard that is approved. As to item number 7, the waiver of the provisions of the Nevada Gaming Control Board of the Nevada Gaming Commission Regulation 4.080 in conjunction with the approval granted in May 2022 shall expire on the date of the regularly scheduled Nevada Gaming Commission meeting in May 2023.
Okay, thank you. Madam Secretary.
Member Katsaros?
Aye.
Member Watkins?
Aye.
Chair Gibson?
Aye. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go on to our items that were held out. Let's go on to restricted 1, please.
Restricted number 1 is the application of Dhaliwal Enterprises 3, Inc., doing business as DI Arco AMPM for a restricted gaming license, and the application of Gurpreet Singh for licensure as sole officer, director, and shareholder.
Okay, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Madam Secretary. Jeff Donato here with Argentum, and with me today is the applicant, Mr. Singh. Mr. Chairman, I do have affirmative presentation, and with that, with your permission, I'd like to provide that.
Please.
Thank you. As you may recall, we were before you on June 8th of 2022 seeking the approval of the applicant to hold the restricted gaming license for a brand new Arco AMPM convenience store at the corner of Desert Inn and Sand Hill. At that meeting, there were some concerns related to a TPO filed against the applicant. As a result, the application was referred back to staff to review, among other things, the calls for service for the applicant's convenience store on Lake Mead Boulevard. I would like to point out that the incident related to the TPO was self-reported during the investigation process, and the applicant has been completely transparent and forthcoming about the incident that he truly does regret ever happened and is ashamed and embarrassed about the same. In the TPO, there was a statement made under the penalty of perjury that a police report was filed on November 6th of 2021. After the meeting on June 8th of 2022, the applicant attempted to track down a copy of that police report that was referred to in the TPO. The applicant first went to the records department for the North Las Vegas Police Department and then to the records department at LVMPD. And at both locations, the applicant was told that no such report existed. There is no disputing the text messages sent by the applicant and attached to the TPO. The applicant takes full responsibility for the things that he said in the text messages and understands the severity of his actions. With regard to the statement made under the penalty of perjury, about filing the police report. If that statement isn't true, I'm not sure what that means for the other statements made in the TPO. In conjunction with the application being referred back to staff, the applicant was requested to provide the calls for service related to his convenience store on Lake Mead for a 2-year period, starting on April 1st of 2020 and going through May 14th of 2022. The applicant obtained the calls for service from the police department, and there were approximately 234 reports and approximately 376 pages. In reviewing all the reports, I didn't locate any reference to the applicant acting or being violent towards any person. In fact, of the 234 reports, I believe only 2 of the reports contain the applicant's name. One, he was listed as a victim, and the other, he was listed as a witness. In further support of the applicant's character, he's collected several letters of support that he has submitted to the agent. They should be attached to your backup materials. Just in case, I did bring extra copies with me if you guys need a copy of those. Since 2018, the applicant has been investigated and approved by the Nevada Gaming Control Board on 4 different occasions, including the investigation and approvals in 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021. As previously indicated, the applicant wishes he could go back to do and say things differently, but all he can do is learn from his mistakes to ensure this doesn't happen again. And with that, we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Donato. Thank you for that history. Yes, this item was referred back. We wanted to look into the TPO and into the claim that there was a police report that was filed. And as you mentioned, and this is an attempt to sort of vindicate you to a certain degree. This is not a declaration of innocence. I don't know, ultimately what happened, but we cannot find evidence that supports to support the claim for TPO. And my understanding is that Mr. Rango voluntarily dissolved TPO on February 2022.
Yes.
Okay, and we did review the service calls to the business location. And Member Watkins, what was your conclusion on those?
Yeah, so I previously had concerns for the threat of violence, and given the materials we were previously provided in our report and allegations made, I had concerns that in response to calls for service that you exhibited violent behavior, and just because that is not exhibited in the police report does not mean that it did not occur. So I'm not saying that it didn't occur, but I also can't say that it did occur, and I won't, make a decision that's adverse to you based on something that I don't know. But I will say that I was concerned about your potentially violent nature when someone is making allegations of violence, and also has a TPO, and also you were it seemed that allegation seemed to be supported by the text message threats. So that was my concern. However, in reviewing the calls for service, you're correct, counsel, or sorry, not counsel, but
Enrolled agent.
yes, Mr. Enroll Agent, that there were 2 mentions, and they did not relate to violence. So I would like to put that on the record in response to the calls for service. So I am happy to move forward with the application at this point in time, given that but I did want to make sure that we did that thorough review of those calls for service.
Okay. So what we're left with based on that, Mr. Creed, is we're left with the text messages, right? And some other history. I'll open it up for discussion.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'll echo that. We don't have any evidence, further evidence to support the investigation we undertook. All the incidents were reviewed. But yeah, I go back to the text. They're less than flattering for you. I don't need to, talk in a manner that's patronizing, but you got a lot more to lose than some people. You got a business here, your family. You got to be smart. They're pretty troubling. I've been in relationships that have been tough too, but at a certain point you don't cross a line, and these are definitely questionable. But the fact that we didn't have more information to support with some information around the TPO, that's where I get over the line where, and you've been licensed before, we haven't had any issues with their operations as far as I can tell from our records. So I'm comfortable with giving a recommendation in support of your application, but this is kind of, I don't want to say strike one, but you're on our radar now, right? You know, you get a pattern of this. If a pattern exists or is created here, that's when things change. You got a lot more to lose. So
I do. I have a 2-year-old son, and I just want to be a role model for him, like my dad was for me.
Could you talk in the
Yeah.
mic? Sorry.
So my son is
Please
2.5
state your name
right
for the
now,
record.
and
What's your name on the record?
my name is Gurpreet Singh, with Dollywood Enterprises, and like I stated, I have a 2.5-year-old son. He's my biggest achievement. You know, without him, I basically lose everything. Everything that I work hard for is for him. Just like what my dad did for me, I want to do for him. And I just want to pass on the legacy over to him. When he grows up, he understands. And I want him to be able to look into my eyes and be like, hey, that's my dad. You know, my dad's a good guy. He made a mistake, but he's a good gentleman. And he provides for his family, and he does everything that I have to do to make sure that everybody's healthy and safe and, you know, secure. And for that, I truly regret the situation. It will never happen again. I wish I could go back and take all these things back. Unfortunately, I can't. But my promise to you guys from here going out, this will never happen again. And I take full responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. I take your word for that. And if we give you that recommendation, now our reputation's on the line for making good or bad decisions here as well, right?
Yes.
So I'm doing this, taking you at your word, what you're saying, that it was, I don't want to say blip on the radar, but it was an incident that unfortunate, it shouldn't have happened. You should make better decisions there, but it's not going to happen again.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the burden is on you, right? I mean, you've been through this is your 4th licensing event.
Yes.
The 3 investigations prior to this were fine, you were approved. The 4th one was this problem arose. The text messages are bad enough that I do have some concerns going forward. I mean, I can't prove whether or not, you know, there was anything more than texts, but I'm concerned about, you know, I'm concerned about your disposition. Those are very violent and graphic texts. So with that, I guess one of the questions I have is, would you entertain a limit on this?
I entertain a limit. I think given the nature of your text and I think it's insightful into your character. We all have bad moments, right? But I can't remember the number of text messages, but they seem to be, you know, a consistent line of behavior. So in addition to the accusations, even though they were not, again, you know, substantiated in the police reports that we found, I don't have any indication that they are true or not true. So I would have caution and would entertain a limitation.
Yeah. There's no suggestion that you're guilty of any of the things that we discussed in the initial instance, but nonetheless, we do have the ability, right, to consider past behavior, right, as a potential predictor of future behavior. And with a condition that restricts the license to, say, a 2-year period, we can, you know, further ensure that we have the ability to review you in 2 years. Okay.
Yes.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah. I wouldn't object to a limitation.
All right. So with that, we wish you all the best. Please, I mean, be aware that there's, you know, I mean, you should do it for other reasons, right?
Yes.
This is something that will, you know, be hanging over you.
It's a big embarrassment. Thank you.
All right, I'd ask for a motion then.
Okay. I move to recommend approval of restricted item number 1 as read into the record by Secretary Rupert pursuant to the condition that the license be limited to 2 years. And that the surveillance system and/or mirrors must be inspected and approved by the Nevada Gaming Control Board Enforcement Division within 60 days of issuance of the state gaming license, and thereafter be maintained at or above the standard that is approved.
Okay, Madam Secretary.
Member Katsaros?
Aye.
Member Watkins?
Aye.
Chair Gibson?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to move forward on a limited basis, knowing that we need to prove ourselves here, and we plan to do that. And I also want to thank Agent Peters for all his hard work during the investigation process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Secretary, restricted 2, please.
Restricted number 2 are the applications of Flowing Tide Pub, Inc., doing business as Flowing Tide Pub for transfers of interest as noted on the agenda. It is also the application by the Justin Seth Muscovy Family Trust to pledge equity interest as noted on the agenda.
Welcome, Mr. Hicks. Good to see you.
Welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All of the next, the 3 applications are all related together. So perhaps if we could just hear them all at once.
See, 3, yeah, they are. Let's go ahead and take, would you read in, so that's, take 2, would you
2
read
and
in 3 as
3
well?
in addition.
And 4?
Or 4, yeah.
Restricted number 3 is the application of FTP 8 LLC doing business as Flowing Tide Pub and Grill for a transfer of interest as noted on the agenda. It is also the application of FTP Holding Company LLC for licensure as a member. Restricted number 4 are the applications of PT Pub 5 LLC doing business as Flowing Tide Pub and Grill, FTP Holding Company LLC, FT Pub 5 LLC doing business as Flowing Tide Pub and Grill, and Flowing Tide Pub Inc. doing business as Flowing Tide Pub and Grill for transfers of interest as noted on the agenda. It is also the applications of Daniel Wadhams, James Wadhams II, and FTP Holding Company LLC for licensure and or finding of suitability as a member and or shareholder as noted on the agenda. Finally, you have the applications by Daniel Wadhams and James Wadhams II to pledge membership interest and equity interest as noted on the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. And welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Member Katsoros, Member Watkins. Pleasure to be here today. I'm Bud Hicks. I'm with the McDonald Carano Law Firm. I'm also an applicant here. My family trust is one of the affected parties, so I'm going both ways today. And if I can have Mr. Wadhams introduce himself.
Mr. Chairman, members, Jesse Wadhams with the law firm of Black & Wadhams, representing the applicants, Daniel Wadhams and James Wadhams too. And I guess I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Dad is in the back there, making sure we're doing our job.
How are you?
James Wadhams is also back there. Thank you, Mr.
If I may, I'd like to make a brief opening statement and
take us through the transaction.
And then I'll take you through the transaction. It appears complicated, but it really isn't.
Please go ahead.
But if I may, and as you can tell, this is sort of a family affair today. We've got the Wadhams family on this side, and over here I've got my son-in-law, Jason Talati. Jason, I'm going to give you a little history here on Jason. He is my son-in-law, but more relevantly, he's a graduate of the UNLV Hospitality Management Program. And after graduating from that a number of years ago and having the good wisdom to marry my daughter, he worked in the hospitality business for a number of years here in Nevada, in and around with the gaming operations. But he saw that he needed to go out and do something on his own. So in 2002, he saw an opportunity to buy into an existing pub operation in Reno. It was the original Flowing Tide Pub. And he bought in as a shareholder, and they needed some help. They were struggling at the time. By 2 years later, he had pretty much straightened out the operations and had made an offer to buy out the original shareholders. And so he brought his mother in at that time, Mary Talati, and Mary and Jason bought out the other shareholders in that company. That was 2004. 2006, he saw that they had a good brand here and a good operation, and they decided to expand it. And so in 2006, he actually offered an opportunity to my family trust to invest and financially in the operation. Also, he had made friends with a gentleman by the name of Justin Mosco. Justin's not here today, but he's been licensed along with us many, many times in front of the board. I don't believe this current board has seen Justin or Jason, so that I brought Jason along, and I'll have him come up in a minute. But so in 2006, the second and third operations were opened. Well, long story short, today there are currently 6 Flowing Tide pubs operating in the state, 6 in Reno, 2 operating here in Clark County, and there's one that's under development, and you'll see that application in a couple months. So we have 8 operating point type pubs now and a bright future ahead of us. Thanks to Jason and Justin's abilities, they've really built a great brand here and great operation. And it's been very fortunate that, they've been there and they knew what they were doing and just doing a very good job. But equally fortunate was that they bumped into the Wadhams brothers back about 10 years ago. Wadhams brothers both worked for Golden Gaming Entertainment and specifically for Sartini Game, which, as you know, is really the state's, if it's not the largest, it's near the largest slot route operator in the state. And they specialize in bar and tavern operations. And they're a little bit younger than my son-in-law, but they're all that same generation, and they really hit it off. And I think you'll be hearing a little bit more about James and Danny. But they really developed some skills in the tavern operation business and slot operations. And they struck it off real well with Jason and Justin. Now, I will address these applications, and I'll admit they're a little complex. But if I may, I'd like to call Jason Talati up here right now. He wanted to make a statement to you.
Please.
Jason?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Jason Talati. Thank you very much for having us here today. I feel like this should be more of a closing speech, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but I just don't want to miss an opportunity to say a few things. So it's been a while since I've stood before you, but I would really like to take this opportunity to thank you all and your predecessors within the board as well as the commission for the amazing privilege to have acquired and held this licensure for the last 22 years in this great state. My grandfather and mentor, Gene Gastanega, was somewhat of a pioneer in the grocery store business starting in the 1950s, later introducing gaming into his model, eventually to form a slot route and have interest in several casinos in Reno and Tahoe. It was early that I knew I wanted to open my own business, not necessarily businesses. And as Bud alluded to, I had an opportunity to buy into a struggling pub in the year 2000. Never did I imagine that I would be here today with 10 taverns. So there are a few people that I would really like to recognize that helped me get to this point. As Bud had mentioned, my partner Justin Moscove, who we've been in business with for about 20 years now. He's really been a driving force in growing this business and making me a better operator and person.
How was Mr. Moscow doing, if I can interrupt you? I was sitting in one of those chairs when he was last year.
I'm sorry, your question was?
How is he?
Oh, he's great. Yeah, excellent. Never better, in my opinion. But yeah, he has high expectations and really a refusal for anything less than perfection. As Bud said, we met the Wadhams brothers somewhere along the way, and I can't really pinpoint how the conversation started about us aligning. But Jimmy and Danny are some of the most dynamic, competent, professional, and outstanding gentlemen that I've ever met. With your blessing, I hope and pray we will be able to move forward in this industry with great momentum, integrity, and success. Lastly, there's one other gentleman that must be recognized not only by me, but I hope that you all will take a moment to reflect on the accomplishments of my current business partner and father-in-law, Bud Hicks. To me, Bud, like my grandfather, has been such an integral part of my success in not only business, but far beyond. There's not enough time in this day to tell you all how much he has done to make me a better person in so many ways. And beyond what he means to me, I just have to close with some final thoughts that I hope you will all recognize. Bud Hicks has undoubtedly logged hundreds, if not thousands of hours before the board and commission, not only on behalf of his clients, all upstanding individuals, I assume, but also in crafting some of the great laws and standards that have been set forth and help to maintain the respect and dignity of this truly privileged form of licensure in this great state. Bud truly embodies all of these great qualities that have helped preserve the integrity of this industry. Intelligence, dignity, grace, respect, professionalism, just to name a few. I truly believe, and I don't think anyone, forgive me, I might get choked up a little bit. I don't think anyone can dispute this, but Bud Hicks has made an incredible impact on this industry in this state over the last 50 years, and one will undoubtedly leave a long, honorable legacy. I'm praying that his presence here in the future is limited so he can start to enjoy the fruits of his labor. Bud, thank you for everything. Yeah. Once again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I appreciate your time and consideration today. Thanks for hearing my spiel.
Thank you very much. And I would agree. Mr. Bud Hicks is one of the finest who's ever appeared in front of us.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, it's not hard to know the turf when my first meeting was in January 1974 before the Gaming Control Board. So that's a lot of time in those hard chairs. I'll tell you that.
Well, we've got Zoom now.
Yeah.
They're still the same chairs.
They're still the same chairs.
Yeah, they are.
Funding that we get.
All right. Thought I'd put in for some type of medical relief. But anyway, thank you, Jason. That was very nice of you. Now, Jesse, did you have something you want to say here before we launch into talking about these applications?
No, not particularly, but I will take my point of privilege to say that I have worked on a couple of gaming issues with Mr. Hicks over the years, and it has been a pleasure to work with him on those and forward to answering any questions from my applicants. And again, Mr. Hicks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the applications themselves, they're a little complicated, but what we're trying to do is bring all of the Flowing Tide pub operations under a single entity that owns it. Now, that's an impossible task because the original Flowing Tide entity, Tide number 1, is a subchapter S corporation. And we can't bring that under the ownership of a limited liability company because of the tax code, and it would be punitive to do that. So we have to leave number 1, the corporation, separate. And then we look at the holding company, which is a presently registered holding company, FTP Holding. And under that, of the 6, it owns and operates the 6 Flowing Tide pubs in Reno. I'm sorry, 5 of the Flowing Tide pubs in Reno. 1 is a subchapter S Flowing Tide pub. The 2 that operate down here now are owned presently by Jason Talati and Justin Moscow. They're not under that structure. We want to bring them under that structure. And the concept here is that the Wadhams brothers are each going to buy 24% interest in the whole package. And that Jason and Justin then at that point own 26% interest each. So it'll be 48-52. So you have different applications here. For example, the first one is the Flowing Tide Pub Inc. Well, we have to get that in order, that the corporation. And so the first item that we're doing is my family trust is selling our 1% interest out to Justin Moscow's trust. And Jason is selling 24% interest. So right now, the Moscow Trust has 1% of its own interest. So 1% from his own interest, 1% from me, that's 2, 24 from Jason, he ends up at 26%. So that's that first part of the application number 2. And he will be giving a note back to Jason, which will be secured by a stock pledge of shares owned by Mr. Moscow. The next couple applications, which talk about FTP 8 and FTP 5, those are the 2 locations that are currently here in Las Vegas that are owned presently 50-50 by Jason and Justin. Number 5 is the one on South Decatur Boulevard, and I find it easier to talk about their locations rather than these numbers. That's South Decatur. Number 8 is Centennial Center. And so they're going to be treated a little bit differently here. Number 5 has been operating for some period of time. For tax reasons, Jason and Justin have agreed to sell to get to the 24-24, 26-26. They will sell some of their interest to the Wadhams brothers, who will own it really for a very short period of time. It's really done just for tax purposes to bring them in as owners of that company. And then that will immediately be followed by a transfer of all of the interest in the Decatur operation up to be owned by FTP Holding Company. FTP 8, it's a little easier story. That's going to be contributed directly by Jason and Justin to FTP Holding Company. And then after those adjustments are made, and all of this will happen really on the same day in order. When all of that happens, assuming we get our approvals today, then there are transfers of interest whereby my family trust and Mary Talati's interest will be sold entirely, will be completely out of the flowing tides at that point. And Jason and Justin will each be selling 2% to James and to Daniel. Bottom line is it all ends up, FTP Holding Company will then be owned 26% by Jason Talati's special trust, his gaming trust. 26 will be owned by Justin Moscove's special or family trust. 24% by Daniel Wadham's, 24% by James Wadham's second. See how simple? So the ownership will match the corporation for one as well. And we also have applications for pledging.
Flowing Tide Pub Inc., the final entity, that's an S corp, you said?
That's the S corp, yeah. So and I was saying too that also in these sales and transfers, there will be notes given by the Wadhams to actually to all of us to separately to my trust, to Jason Talati's trust, to Justin's trust, and to Mary Talati to pay for their interest. There is a substantial cash payment, but the balance is going to be carried on notes. And those notes will all be secured. So again, it's complicated on paper, and it was complicated. Well, it was really complicated to come up with the structure. Thankfully, we had a good tax accountant working with us. And it was also complicated to explain it to your staff, but they jumped right on it and understood. By the way, I'd like to thank Katie Finlandson, who got into this and understands it now, I believe, and did a great job for us. And also Ron Messberg, he was the agent to whom this was assigned for a period of time. I was just very sorry to see him leave the board, and I understand the circumstances. He was a great agent. I worked with him many times over the years. He definitely will be missed. So with all of that said, we're here to answer any questions you may have. Oh, if I may, you asked about Justin Moscow. Since you were here as deputy AG.
Yeah. I didn't want to get into it, but yeah.
And I know it's probably in your reports, but Justin did a stupid thing. About 10 or 11 years ago, got in trouble with the law, had to plead guilty to a gross misdemeanor, was threatened with a felony, but he pled guilty to a gross misdemeanor. And he was put on, we came before the board, he reported it, and we came before the board and commission. His license had been limited for a period of times. We appeared before the commission a number of times. And I've got to thank the commission, and particularly Dr. Allen, who was chairman of the commission at the time, had some sympathy for all of this. And they understood that, and Justin was the first to admit that it was a terribly stupid thing he did. So he lived up to the conditions. And we finally got the conditions all lifted a couple of years ago. And but since then, he's been doing really well. And it's just, this is one of the things that over all the years I've practiced, I've seen the board and commission give a number of people breaks. Sometimes they haven't worked out so well. I saw the gentleman before us. I wish him good luck, and I'm sure he'll do fine. But Justin sort of, is a perfect example. You've got to be understanding sometimes, and board and commission were, and they worked with him, and it had a tremendous impact on his life, but also his family's life, and so it's a real positive. So that's my Justin Moscow report to you. It's a good thing, but I've talked enough. Do you have any questions now?
I'll open it for questions.
I was here when the condition was removed.
Were you?
Mr. Moscow, but I wasn't
Yeah.
there prior, so I wasn't really familiar with that. But nevertheless, I did want to say, Mr. Talati, excellent opening. We've had a few today where everybody's just really prepared. When you do something like that, you can kind of feel it. You know, it's you do it for one reason. It's really heartfelt, or you're in the doghouse. But I suspect it was really heartfelt. I mean, it was excellent. Well done. And I appreciate the opening too, Mr. Hicks, because I was always unclear as to all the different parts
Moving
with Flowing Tide. I'm very familiar with Flowing Tide, being from Reno, but I do want to get the numbers right. There's 8 right now, and then there's going to be 2 more. And the 2 more were
There are 6 operating in Reno, 2 operating. One's in Clark County, one's in City of North Vegas.
Okay.
Those are the operating ones. So there's 8 of them. There's 1 under development. Now, Jason mentioned in his comments too, he has interest in 2 other restricted locations that are not affiliated with Flowing Tide.
He said 10. So
yeah, that's where it came from.
And I can't remember from the materials. What were those?
They are the Parlor in Reno and Sasquatch Tavern in Birdi.
Okay.
Yes.
I remember when you're getting licensed for the Parlor as well, if I recall. Okay.
And I think we'll be back in front of you on the Parlor matter in a month or 2.
Okay.
Something else.
So what's the future for Flowing Tide then? More locations?
Possibly.
Jason, come on up.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to ask Jason because I'm not the future. I'm the past.
Okay, I shouldn't say possibly. Yes.
Okay.
These gentlemen, the Wadhams, we've been fortunate enough to align with them. And as I've told many people, hopefully in an effort for Justin and myself to scale back since we've been at it all these years. But with the contacts that they have and the ambition that they have, there's undoubtedly some other locations in the pipeline. There's one that we're submitting an application for out on Las Vegas Boulevard, south across from South Point. And so you'll probably see that come across your desk soon. And then there are a couple other projects that we have in the works that we're working on. So yeah, it's likely we'll be moving forward with some expansion.
So is it going to be Flowing Tide branded or something different?
Yes. Yeah. We have no plans to stray from this brand at this time, but we're open-minded to that notion though.
It's been really strong for you.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been super fortunate.
Yeah. And our history or the reports that we have does not go back as far as your grandpa, but you said in the 1950s, your grandpa had interest in Nevada gaming operations.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, he was from Paradise Valley, but grew up in Winnemucca, and got into the grocery store business. Eagle Thrifties, ended up selling to Rayleigh's back in the 80s, early 80s. Yeah, so
sounds like it's in your blood.
It is. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you for that, Mr. Hicks, and thank you.
My pleasure.
Mr. Talati. Member Watkins, do you have any questions?
Any other questions for me before I sit down?
Not substantially, but so the ultimate goal is to bring the Las Vegas locations under the FTP holding company or the S Corp.
Well, no, it'll be under FTP holding company.
Okay.
And in the future, I think you'll probably see any new additions coming in under FTP holding company as well.
Okay, so it seems that there are a series of transactions that maybe make it appear to be complex, but it may just be complex because there's a series of transactions, right?
That's right.
Okay.
And as you know, the gaming regulations are quite explicit on the approvals that we have to have. So it was a task to prepare the applications and make sure we got everything covered, but I think we do. And your staff has been great. They've been great. They actually found an error in our agreements and I had back and fix it. So much appreciated.
Perfect.
Thank you for that. Any additional questions?
I wouldn't mind hearing from the Wadhams.
Yeah, let's do that.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members, Watkins, Casaurus. My name is Daniel Wadhams for the record. My brother James Wadhams II is not here with us today, but I'm here to answer any questions. In terms of the deal itself, we're excited about the opportunity to, we had a great run in our previous employment. I've been before you guys quite a bit the last 2 or 3 years, but the opportunity of kind of going out on our own and joining up to guys like Jason Talley and Justin Moscow was just too good to pass up.
So you're no longer employed with
No,
Golden or 13?
no, we left, both my brother and I, our last day at Golden was January 7th, 2022.
No issues with non-competes or anything like that?
No issues. We have agreements, the separation agreements and all that stuff, but everything is, we have a great working relationship. They supply all the slot machines still for all the games in the store, and have no plans in the future for all those. Any new locations will be under Golden's slot machine as well.
And you both reside down here in Vegas?
Yes.
Okay. How long were you guys with?
He was with, he started a few years before me. He's a little bit older, but he was there for a little over 15 years. I was there for a little over 12.
Okay.
And I've held various roles there over the years. I think my first licensing was in 2015 or 16. I think his was in 2011. So we've been before the board quite a few times over the years with those Golden.
And then at the onset, was it mentioned that your father's in the audience?
He's back there.
Okay, so he's James the First.
He's the original, is what he was calling himself.
The one and only.
All right.
If we could constrain questions to the deal itself before we move into anything.
It's hard to resist with,
Yeah. No, I didn't have any background questions. As was mentioned, you're both licensed before. There's nothing concerning. It was just really the transactional details to go through, which Mr. Hicks already stepped us through. So I don't think there's anything else for me, but I did want to hear from you at least. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
All right, Member Watkins, you have anything to tell us with?
Congratulations to each of you. Happy to move forward.
All right, then I'd ask for a motion, please, on these 3 items.
Is it, oh,
So 2, 3, 4.
2, 3, and 4, okay. I move to recommend approval of restricted items number 2, 3, and 4, as read into the record by Secretary Rupert.
Madam Secretary.
Member Katsaros?
Aye.
Member Watkins?
Aye.
Chair Gibson?
Aye.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your patience today and understanding this complex deal. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Take care.
Thank you, board members. We appreciate it.
All right, and with that, we completed our agenda, and that is, we will close, see here, hold on. Public,
Mr. Chair, we have public comment.
Public comment.
yeah, this brings us to our last agenda item, public comment.
This item is placed on the agenda to give the public an opportunity to comment on gaming-related matters.
All right, so anyone wishing to make a public comment, please step to the podium and state your name for the record. There's no one left in Southern Nevada. What about Carson? There is no one left.
Nobody in Carson.
All right, with that, that will close our public comment section, and this concludes our Gaming Control Board meeting for the month of November, and we are adjourned. Thank you.